Here we go.
G'day fans and welcome to another exciting episode of Rip It Off the Card, the show about collectibles, collecting and everything else in between. It is we're into November. How good is this? The Melbourne Cup was yesterday. That's all done and dusted. The long weekend is over and here we are back in the saddle for some very, very exciting Docky Who talk. And of course, if you're going to talk about Docky Who, Aaron comes up automatically. Mr. Aaron, how you going?
Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who. Yeah, I'm going pretty well, mate. How are you?
Very, very, very cool. Now, this is a funny one, right? So already people have been asking us, because, it's now November. We're going to be finishing the show at Christmas time in December. So we've only got like about 7 or 8 episodes left in the year. And some people have actually asked, what are we going to be doing for the Christmas show? I said, mate, we're going to be like the shops. We've already gone past Christmas. We're already preparing for Easter next year. So we've got hot cross buns on the go and like chocolate eggs and all the rest of it. You got to think like 6 or 7 months ahead, as does retail. Now, speaking of retail, of course, the greatest news in the entire universe occurred a couple of days ago. And that, of course, was the opening of Aaron's store. Dude, how was it? How's it all been?
Well, it's been actually really fantastic. It's just been flat out the whole time, catching up with a lot of people I haven't seen through lockdown. And then... just getting back into selling stuff and buying stuff and tidying up the shop. Even though we've had like 3 months to tidy it up, it's still never enough time. So yeah, it's been a really busy week.
Very, 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 very cool. Now, of course, last week we had a bit of a massive cock up because of the power outage. And how did the power outage hit you, old son? What was the result of that?
Well, we were going to have a special opening at 6 because that's when retail opened in Victoria, and we're going to open at 6 to midnight and keep getting pizzas until no one could fit pizza anymore, and open up the shop drinks fridge. But of course, anyone who's been to the shop knows that the windows are painted out, so it hits dusk and it's totally black inside, and without power we couldn't do it. So we had to cancel that, and then we didn't get power Saturday or Sunday, so it was a pretty flat weekend.
Now, speaking of black, this actually leads us exactly into what I wanted to show earlier, and I did kind of press a button a little bit prematurely, so you know what's coming. It's a bit of this. Yes, so good old, we're back again. So what is actually happening this Friday night, old son?
This Friday night, we're having grand reopening Mark II. So if you download the new version of the app, we're having the same thing as last week, but it's the new improved version. It runs slightly faster. We're all slightly better rendered. The pizza's going to taste better. And now we've got IMAX tickets to give away. So our friends at IMAX were generous enough to help us out with this reopening to give a couple of double passes to IMAX. So anyone else who's been like me and feels like they have missed out on almost a year's worth of movies and they're all hitting around December and you want to go see them at IMAX, if you come in this Friday night or over the weekend, there's a chance to win some double passes to Melbourne IMAX.
Speaking of Melbourne, I like this one from Gavin. Gavin's from Sydney. So he was asking, will we hit 10,000 like the Cup did? Imagine having 10,000 viewers watching this show. Tell you what, that eBay section would be unbelievably long. But so Friday night, it is take 2 again for what it's worth. And it should be an absolutely awesome night for all of us nerds to get together, talk about collectibles and have a bit of a laugh. Now that the long weekend's over, there should be actually more people appearing than normal, which is very, very cool. And as we did last time, if you don't exactly know where the place is, it's at Shop 3, number 1 Main Street in Blackburn. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron? You're absolutely chomping at the bit to get some nerds into the store talking about nerdy stuff.
I am. And anyone wants that information, we're on Instagram and Facebook as well. So like and follow those. And while you're at it, you can hop over to the Sci-Fi Zone page. You're probably already on it if you're here, but if you're watching it later somewhere weird, the Sci-Fi Zone page on Facebook, Aaron's Collectibles on Facebook and Instagram. Go and like us and follow us. Then you'll never miss an episode again.
Very, very cool. I like this one from Gavin. Is the pizza fermenting from a week or two? Are they new, mate? They're like nerds, mate. We don't get old. We just mature with age. Doesn't mean we're maturing to something more positive. But what do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
Talking about fermenting, we were going to open the drinks fridge and, the drinks from pre-lockdown were sort of out of date, so no problem, except because they're not sugar ones, they're all the chemical sweeteners. I had one and they just tasted like poison. So we've had to dump all of those and get new, fresh drinks because we don't want to poison any of our customers. So fresh pizza all night long and good drinks, not the dodgy stuff.
Mate, you got to stop doing the Howard Hughes in the store and drinking your own urine. All right, so let's move on from there. And because it's a special docu, don't you start whipping that one out. There we go. It tastes damn good. Oh yeah, it goes down well. So there you go. And because it is a Docu Who episode tonight, we've got to be very, very excited to know that good old Mr. Phil has sort of slipped his way into the episode. So the president is in the house. So therefore, we've already we've got cred points, which is really, really cool. And I'm going to tell you something. Oh, here we go. The Vile's even joined us. Put my Vile. Was it? Oh, my vile eyes, put the mask back on from the Halloween show. Absolutely, totally agree with you. Now, speaking of things, the coolest thing in the entire universe, so the shop's opening on Friday. It is absolutely awesome. But, you know, as always, we have our writers of the week. People who come into the store and they sort of get photographs with Aaron and myself. Well, this time we've got a writer who physically can't be in the store because, guess what? She's from Russia. So we got good old Tatiana, is that right? She's an international writer. So who we got, Mr. Aaron?
So yeah, this is Tatiana. I can't pronounce her last name, so I won't try. Who found us through watching the X-Files shows and then decided to go back and watch a couple of old shows and decided we were actually pretty cool. And sent us some pictures of her and her collection and said we could use them for Writer of the Week this week. So this is our first international writer.
Very, very cool. So, as you can tell from the left picture, she's from the Red Room in Twin Peaks, and she's got a little Grogu out there in the snow, which is kind of cool. But if you want to see something really groovy, kids, get a load of this. Is it Geiger or Giger? I can never pronounce it right.
The Geiger, the HR Hans Rudy Geiger, the designer from Alien, has a couple of bars around the world, and this actually cripples me with jealousy because it is a place I would love to visit. There's the Geiger bar in Switzerland there, and you can see all of the roof is like a big skeleton and bone structure. And there's a whole lot of really amazing artwork, all designed by him in the Geiger bar. And there's a little friend on the roof there, an alien. But I think the Harkonnen chairs from Dune are in there somewhere or in one of them. And there's a whole lot of amazing stuff. Now, I am someone who loves to visit movie locations. I drag my poor family all over the place, but that's not actually a movie location, but it's kind of cooler because it's designed by Geiger. So that's a really cool picture there, really cool place to go get a drink.
And if you're wondering when they're doing, people are coming in, you know, how you've been vaxxed, double vaxxed, or whatever, they have someone at the door with a clicker. And well, you know what the clicker, of course, is known as? The Geiger counter.
Oh, boy. I think we just lost our one international viewer.
Yeah, no, she's done the bolt. Yeah, so there you go. You are right, Mark. Yes, we're now international stardom. So there we go. We've actually had people coming from all over the world. We've got to break a record, though, because on my other show that I do on Monday nights, I actually did have a guy turn up from Pakistan. So that was kind of, he only appeared once, but he certainly didn't pop in by accident. He was there for a reason. So there you go. And you are right, Mick. That is absolutely outstanding. The Geiger restaurant. And yeah, you definitely want to go in there and yes, exactly right. So there you go. Yeah, absolutely awesome. I was waiting for a dad joke. Well, you got to admit that was pretty good, wasn't it? It was one of my best ones. All right, so we're going to move on to something particularly exciting, and this one's actually kind of groovy. Was it bad jokes not needed? You always need bad jokes. I like this one. Old fart gaming. Okay, yes, we definitely need bad jokes. That's what it's all about. All right, so now this is a good one. So we got our treasure of the suburbs, and once again we're going international. So we had an international ride of the week, Tatiana from Russia, and this time we've actually got a dude from the USA. If I could press the right button, it is Greg Cochran from America. Now, in the shows in the past, for those people who will definitely remember, we have our good old collector friend Spankin. And when I say Spankin, I don't mean this Spankin. No, I mean the other Spankin. So I thought I'd just clarify that. Now, Spankin, as in the one here, is a huge collector of props and costumes and memorabilia, spanning multiple generations effectively. Well, Greg contacted us a few months ago, and he's actually the equivalent of Dave, if you will, over in the US, and has a massive collection of costumes, props, and other doodads from movies and TV shows. So these are all replicas. They're not screen used, but he's been collecting since he was 4 years old. So he's been at it for 55 years. That's actually 1 year older than me. So he sent through a whole range of photographs of his collection. Now, as of right now, this was actually in an apartment. And he's gone out and he's building his new house to store it all. But he's been collecting stuff from movies and TV shows since for 5 decades. So what do you reckon about some of this stuff, Mr. Aaron?
Well, that's absolutely amazing. The Time Machine is a fantastic piece.
Yeah.
just don't. I don't think I've seen one locally. I have seen a couple, and there's of course the famous episode of The Big Bang Theory. But imagine having the H.G. Wells time machine in your garage.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things to do with the time machines, there's a couple of things that he's still getting delivered, and like a full-size Morlock and all the rest of it, which is very, very cool. Michael has made a reference to good old Planet of the Apes. Absolutely. So Greg has been sort of like dealing with everything to do with movies and TV shows for all this entire time, and is a very, very dedicated and hardcore collector, and he's a huge fan of I Dream of Jeannie with Barbara Eden. He's actually met Barbara Eden on a few occasions. He's even written a book about it, which I'll show at the end. So, but his whole place was just decked out and all this stuff. And you got to admit, when you sort of start looking through it, there's a lot of really good quality material there, little bits of everything. So he's actually got like the full-size time machine plus the tiny one right down the bottom here, which you might remember from the movie where he opens the box and he sets the time machine going into the future. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, he's in the process of moving house. He's in Florida, as we said, and getting ready to go elsewhere to sort of set it all up. And there's a full-size B9 and a Twiggy and all that. So it's one of those things, whenever you see the photographs, all you're doing is just looking around thinking, oh my God, there's just stuff everywhere. So I've never seen a Twiggy before. Have you?
No, I don't think I have. I've seen a lot of different replica things, but not a Twiggy. So that's a first.
Bitty, bitty, bitty. Yeah, exactly right. So there you go. And of course, we spotted this one straight away somewhere in time. So it's not just armor related things, it's also just fabric related things as well. And of course, this was a costume worn by Christopher Reeve. For those who've seen Somewhere in Time, which is an absolutely outstanding movie. And he's even got, I think it's a replica of an Emmy Award. I can't imagine it's a real thing. But imagine that. You could actually give yourself, we could give ourselves an Emmy Award. What do you reckon, dude?
I don't think anyone would believe it.
Yeah, I don't think they would either. But that's very spectacular, I've got to say.
Yeah.
And of course, yeah, I mean, an I Dream of Jeannie bottle, which is really cool. And of course, he's displayed all his stuff really nicely in the glass cabinets with the stands.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly right. Now, we were discussing this, funnily enough, just last week? I'm losing on the Halloween show. The is it Talkie Tina or Tiny Tina? Talkie Tina, isn't it?
Talkie Tina. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah, it's written on the bottom there. Yeah, Talkie Tina. So, yeah, we were discussing that on the Halloween show, and of course, he's got one of these in his collection. I think that I can't remember the names of the characters. These are from Star Trek. The boss watching, you'd be able to tell us what they are.
Tellosonian.
No, it's not Tellarite, is it? Tellosonian, is that right? So yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, something like
cool.
like that.
Yeah. The Vol's watching. He could tell us. Yeah, a Mork from Orson costume. So yeah, very, very cool. So everybody needs some ruby slippers. So yeah, really, really groovy. So it's a good range of just all this material, which is absolutely fantastic. And Lily from the Munsters, that is a grouse-looking dress, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And of course, if you look in the background, he's got Robin and Wonder Woman. So
yeah. It's really amazing. I mean, if this is all in his unit and then he's going to expand to a house, can you imagine how amazing it'll look when it's all displayed and it's not cramped and it's all spread out? It'll be quite stunning.
Yep, totally agree. And I think these cats are from they're the Catwoman cats from Batman. Yeah, you'd agree with that?
Yeah, the 66 Batman. They're the cats. They've actually done a statue with those cats on. So
okay, very, very cool. And you're right, Mark. It's absolutely awesome. I mean, so the thing with Greg is he's completely devoted to what he's buying and collecting. And of course, with all the stuff, you got to have posters. So he's got all the posters all adorning the walls. Excuse me, all nicely framed and really well displayed. So there'd be some originals in there and probably some absolute classics. So. Which is very, very cool. And the main thing is that he's actually done something even I haven't done. He's written his own book called Stay Tuned, which you can buy on Amazon. So it talks about, it's like a biography of himself, as well as his collection and his time meeting Barbara Eden and all the rest of it. So so you can check that out. And the ratings of it, it's actually scored very well in terms of the ratings. So that's good old Greg from America. So yeah, what do you reckon of that? Oh, there you go. Even Spankin is saying he's jealous. So, yeah, it's very, very cool. Oh, here we go. It was the oh, shit, I can't pronounce that. Even with it written down. Telosians. Yeah.
Telosian. Yeah. We were close enough.
Yeah, we were close. Yeah.
For a Doctor Who fan, that's pretty good. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. We're not. Sorry, go on.
So he is the American version of Spankin, isn't he? His collection is posters and props and movie and TV. So it's very close. That's an awesome collection. So thanks for sharing with us, mate.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Once he's got his new place and he gets it all set up, it'll be definitely something well worth checking out, which is cool. Very, very cool. Now, speaking of things that are worth checking out, it's time we move on to something a bit more interesting regarding collectibles. It's this. All right, so what are we talking about tonight, old son?
we've got a few different things. Before we go to the first slide, I didn't have time because I've had a busy day, but a few things leaked online today, and one of those things were pictures of the Black Series AT-AT for Lego. So there is a new massive Lego AT-AT on its way out, I think, for the end of November. So before we get into the actual segment, I thought I'd mention that because that's pretty cool and one of my favorite vehicles.
Just what the world needs, another friggin' walker. So there you go. And if you've been watching The Walking Dead, there's plenty of walkers in that, but they're the two-legged variety. So there you go. Speaking of Star Wars related stuff, good old Mandalorian, just what the world needs, more bloody action figures.
Well, this is a bit of a Star Wars episode as well, isn't it? Because they have announced a bit of new stuff and some is available and on pre-order. And they've announced a new retro wave of The Mandalorian. So there's so many different waves of Star Wars figures at the moment. There's the Black Series and the standard figures, and then there's the classics figures, and then there's the retro figures. And the retro figures are new figures that are made to look like they were made in the 70s and 80s. And this is the Mandalorian wave.
See, we've discussed this before about how they're doing the packaging, the distressed look. I mean, I just don't get why you do that. No,
I absolutely hate it because, you know, I would buy that and be trying to upgrade it to a better version straight away, but there is no better version. So it is a bit annoying for collectors, especially as these are all amazing characters that everyone's going to want.
I guess you get the black texture out and you color in all the white bits and try and make it mint again, eh? But no, I don't get it at all. But yes. I mean, it's nice that it's funny they actually have to put the word retro on there as if collectors wouldn't know what it is. So it's almost like saying for stupid people, it's retro, okay? That's why it looks the way it does. What do you reckon?
I think those stickers I think they are stickers, so I think you can peel them off if you don't like them. But I just think with Star Wars fans, everyone who's collecting hardcore and getting one of everything kind of knows what they're getting now. You don't really have to put retro on it to see what they're trying to do.
I'd love it if you said, "Oh yeah, you have these in the store. Someone buys them. Oh, the stickers are removable," and you go, "No, they're not." Absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, but anyway, there's more, and of course the Book of Boba Fett, the trailer came out this week, so there's probably going to be more of these bloody things as we go along. Yes. Speaking of all things Mandalorian shaped, can't get away from Mr. Phil, you're right. We can't get away from Star Wars. It's just the nature of the beast, just like we can't get away from freaking Doctor Who. So we'll have to slip in a bit of the old Doctor Who very, very soon. What can I say? It was very, very cool. More freaking Star Wars, more Mandalorians. Is that right?
Yep. So this is the new Black Series ones that are available on pre-order at the moment as well. And again, it's a bit of a Star Wars theme to this segment because a lot of it dropped this week. I think that's very cool. That's from the Ice Spider series. I don't know if a lot of people realize that's actually Ralph McQuarrie concept art, those spiders. They were originally on Dagobah in some of the very early Empire Strikes Back art, and they reused them in The Mandalorian. So I think that's a really cool little creature that they've added in with the set.
Gavin, more Flaming Grogu. Well, guess what? You get more than that. There you go.
Yes. Yes. So you're right. You get more Grogu. This show, 100% more Grogu than last episode. So there you go. That all comes with the same Mandalorian set, though.
The picture of this was so tiny, I had to try and blow it up, and he's still pretty small as. But yeah, just what the world needs: Grogu's and freaking Mandalorians and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, it's. What do you think of all this stuff? Do you reckon it's working for you?
Well, I know that Disney likes to get woke and everything, but do they really need to have him bending the knee? But
good on you.
But I actually think, yes, they do. I really love The Mandalorian, and it's actually good to see Star Wars fans all united in really liking something. Everybody loves the merchandise and Grogu and The Mandalorian. If it starts to get to the point where they've made 3 or 4 seasons and people are like, it's not as good as it used to be, then I reckon wind it up and go on to something else. But at the moment, I think it's good.
Very, very cool. I like this one. Carol says, adorable. He's so adorable. Ironically, the action figure, that is probably like only this big, so it's a bit hard to find that adorable. But yeah. I like this one from Gavin. Galactic Lives Matter. I love it. Awesome. Now, guess what? Just in case you thought we were going to steer away from Star Wars, we're not, because we're back with this. Now, I've got to admit, even this looks pretty cool. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think this is pretty cool too. One of the things I think Star Wars has lacked for a long time is good play sets. But with the classic series, they've actually been doing some stuff. What I think collectors want is, and that is to release screen accurate play sets to display your figures on. This is the latest one they've announced, and it actually comes with one of the Black Death Troopers as well. And this is the bar from The Mandalorian. So we've had the cantina before, and we've had a couple of different play sets, but this is, I think, the first modern play set we've had. We've had Jabba's Palace and we've had Bespin Control Room. I can't really think of any other modern playsets they've had for a while. So this is really good, especially if you're getting all those figures we just showed you. Now you've got somewhere amazing to display them. And what it looks like is it's modular. So you can see the little studs on each end. There's sort of 3 pins. It looks like you can rearrange it or maybe get a couple of them to make a bigger version of the playset, which is always a handy thing to do. I always, in the shop, like to display things behind or in front of the play sets like this, because it really does bring your figures out and makes them look better. So if you are an opener and like to display stuff, this is a no-brainer. I think this is a really cool set.
I find it interesting that with the action figures, they'll distress the outside of the action figures, make the black look all cracked and whatever, but the boxes look mint. So go figure
that's showing your lack of Star Wars knowledge, because this isn't a retro set. This is just the Mandalorian set. So if you look at the figures in this, they're not like the retro-looking figures. That said, you can use the retro-looking figures in this, but that's what I was saying about they've made so many different versions and so many different lines at the moment. It really doesn't matter. You don't need to put those distress features on them.
Well, guess what? I'm gonna one up you on that one. Go back, get the retro sticker that apparently is removable from the figures, put it on this box, kick the shit out of this box, and go, there you go. There's a retro version of the playset. So back at you, son. I'm thinking it'll be the only release of its type in the world, and it's a variant.
It'll be worth more, yeah, for sure.
It's like, I know my collectibles. Yeah, there you go. I like that. You don't know your bloody stuff because this is not retro. Just like, freaking
customized packaging. So
exactly right. And you just drop it off the back of a truck and drag it down the street, and people think, oh, it's the retro version because the sticker, as you said, is being put on it.
No, they don't. They just think that's Australia Post.
Exactly right. Now, for those who are thinking already, mate, we're over the Star Wars, give us some freaking Docky Who. Well, guess what? Look at more bloody Star Wars.
So, yeah, this is a bit of a Star Wars episode, but this was too cool not to sort of highlight, because I think they've done just about every version of the different lightsabers that have appeared on screen and even that have appeared in other media. But this is the latest Black Series lightsaber that's coming out, and it's the Princess Leia one. And I think this one...
Wait. She's not a princess. It's just Leia. She's long since forgotten being a princess. So get your facts right, Star Wars dude.
I'm a Doctor Who dude. But anyway, I digress. We don't see this one very much, so I think this will come out and might even not sell really fast. But once it's gone, I don't think they'll produce it again in any hurry. It's like sort of Mace Windu, where it comes out and everyone's like, oh, the purple one, and it doesn't sell the fastest because he's not the most popular character. He's still popular, but when it sells out, then you never see another one because they never reissue it. And this one I get this feeling about for every 10 Luke's lightsaber or Darth Vader's lightsaber, this one's only going to come around every 10 or 20 years where they reissue it, kind of thing. So if you do like Leia, princess or otherwise, I would be grabbing this lightsaber.
Well, just to verify what I said, up here it just says Leia Organa, right? So, which, obviously it was before she got married. Otherwise, she'd be Leia Solo, you'd think. Yes, that just reiterates that. And yeah, that's just a title. That's not a name, so not general. So there you go. But yeah, very, very cool. I mean, there's whole discussions as to how she learned how to use a lightsaber in the movies anyway during the timeline. But yeah, whatever. But yeah, very, very cool. If you like your layers, and you can whip out a saber and have a whale of a time, which is
do you know what, I see these. Do you know what? I see these guys on YouTube, and they seem to be proficient with lightsabers. So it doesn't really surprise me that Leia could do a lightsaber with a bit of training. If some of these nerds like me can just get it and do a bit of whirling around and look pretty good.
I'd love to see you whirling around a lightsaber. What can I say, eh? All right. And for those people who are absolutely sick to death of effing Star Wars, guess what? We're actually over it, and it's now G.I. Joe.
Yeah. So here's just a little G.I. Joe update. For anyone who collects the vintage G.I. Joe, they might know that Hasbro have been reissuing in sort of extra high detail with lots of accessories some of the original figures. This is some of the originals that are coming out at the moment. I always loved growing up. I had some of these as, the 80s versions. I always loved the one that come with the crocodile, except the one with the crocodile in the 80s, it was like a solid navy green crocodile with no articulation. That was just like one of those cheap accessories you get in a packet of rubber or plastic toys. This looks like a real crocodile with a big a big jaw that's open and the correct colouring and everything. So it's definitely an upgrade. I do wonder though. I know you get good with training stuff. Can you train crocodiles, or would it just turn around and kill you the first chance it had?
No, you can train them, but you have to make the the instructions. Yeah, get the instructions out pretty quickly. You got to do it like be pretty snappy about it. Oh, I was trying desperately to get to the line, I couldn't get to it, so I'm too busy reading what's going on here. So Gavin said, "Will there ever be a lightsaber in Doctor Who?" Carol said, "Get on with Doctor Who." Like Thomas has said, "Doesn't Doctor Who have a sonic screwdriver?" Everybody's gas bagging about Doctor Who, except for Philip Nichols. He's just slipped into something completely different. He used to actually talking about G.I. Joe, and he's the president of Doctor Who. So. How about that, eh? Absolutely.
Do you know what?
awesome.
We usually have quite a few presidents because Phil's here. Kelvin was president. Jethro was president. Greg King was president. This is like the Doctor Who Presidents Club.
Very, very cool. We could actually create our own brand new Doctor Who fan club at this rate. So there you go. As Mark, yeah, you're right. As hurry up. You're just going to be patient, guys. We've got all this other shit to get through first.
Stuff to get through. Sorry, guys.
Exactly right. Including this. Yes, it's useless pop of the week. And I'm going to tell you right now, fans, behind that slogan, there is not a Doctor Who collectible. So there you go. What do we got tonight, Mr. Aaron? What are we talking about pop-wise?
Well, pops have this thing where they stylize a character, and you generally know what it is just by sort of the way they've stylized it. Your brain makes that leap to realize who the character is. But a lot of pops don't have all the facial details and the mouth and the nose and stuff like that. This one, they've gone for the minimalistic look, and I really don't think it works. So this one would be one that Vile would probably put in his collection, actually, because he loves visiting Disney, and this is Buzz Lightyear.
Remember, once you pop, you can't stop.
So, as you can see, sometimes they get away with it. And, I think everyone knows we're not big fans of pop vinyls, but I can appreciate them from the level of if you are collecting something and they bring out the pop version of it, if there's a nice version of it, you'd probably grab it. But I don't know why they have just given him eyes and a chin, because it isn't looking like the Buzz Lightyear I know. That's going to give no one a Woody.
Yeah, exactly right. Is that his chin? I thought it was his mouth. I said, why have they done his mouth like that? The chin's meant to be under here. That looks freaking weird.
Maybe it is his mouth. I don't know. That's why it's the useless pop of the week, because I thought it was his cleft chin or something. But it's the spiral. It's an ampersand. Who knows what it's meant to be? Do you know what it is? It's useless.
I like this one from Mark. It's another plastic paperweight, or you can use it to chock it under your tie so your car or your caravan doesn't roll backwards. So there you go. And now we've actually planted a seed. Good old Phil. Phil slipped to this idea of having a Doctor Who Victoria Club's President's Club. So there you go. So if that actually ever happens, Mr. Phil, you can thank us because it was mentioned on here first. So there you go. Very, very cool. Anyway, so useless pop of the week, and I totally agree with you. With the trailer coming out for the movie, you think they could do a slightly better job than this. Someone actually thought this was actually a good design when they first released it, but there you go. But I tell you, things that are actually a damn good design, it's got to be the good old Greg King's Cheaper Things. And I think this is actually a relatively shortish segment tonight. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
It is, because we've ordered a bit of stuff again, and no one is replying to my inquiries about their crap products anymore. They've not supplied us any more entertaining correspondence. But I have ordered something new this week, and this came up on my Facebook feed, and it's a tiny Tendo, which I guess is playing on Nintendo. It's a smaller version of the Game Boy, and it comes with, well, this is why I thought it must be some dodgy thing, because when it first started coming up, it said it came with 300 games, and then about 2 days later, it was coming with 400 games. So they found some extra RAM for some more games. And then when it was first coming up, it came in 5 colors, and then about 3 days later, it was coming in 10 colors. And the thing that got me, though, when I tried to click close on the page, it instead came up like extra bonus 50% off if you buy now. And then when I tried to buy now, it gave me like 10% off, because right down in tiny, tiny writing, it said up to 50% off, not guaranteed 50% off when you click. So we have ordered for Greg King to test out and road test the games a tiny Tendo, which is a small version of the Game Boy with 400 built-in retro games.
How good is that? Sorry, I forgot to click this earlier. So yes, 400 games. Look, I love it. It's endless fun. So what happens when the fun runs out, or if the fun runs out? What if it's not endless? Like 50, 60 years later?
comes with a battery recharger. And also, when I was trying to click away from it, see all these specials down the bottom were coming up. So after I got through the 50% off, then it was like, buy one, 10% off, buy two, 15%, buy three, 20%. But, I wasn't going to buy any more than we had to. It must be officially licensed, because that looks like Super Mario, the real version there. So Nintendo must be behind them. And apparently it's the #1 selling stocker filler of 2021. So we're onto something good.
So I'm a bit disappointed with you, because it says down here, collect all. Isn't the idea when you say collect all that you actually collect all? You don't pike out like two or three down, two or three into it. What kind of a collector are you?
Well, I tell you what, I'll buy one and you can collect all the others with your money.
Yeah, exactly right. So there you go. Oh, hang on. And this is the cart, by the way. So sorry, I forgot to get to this one. So yeah.
So this was the cart. As we went through the cart, it's another one of those things where it said it was going to be $36, and then as I'm going through the cart, it goes up to $47, and then on my way out, it goes, do you want to add like a second controller so two people can play it at once, and TV cords? So I'm like, yeah, of course. So I put that in the cart too. So it got up to I think 43 US in the end, which is about 79 Australian by the time we did the conversions. Now, we still haven't got the Halloween mystery box that we were meant to get by Halloween. So this is meant to be a stocking filler. What's the bet we don't even get this side of Christmas? This will be the Easter stocking filler or something.
For those who get to visit the store, whether it be on Friday or on the weekend or whatever else, Aaron has actually put on display all the stuff that's already arrived in a glass cabinet behind the door. And I got to say, it looks spectacular. Everybody who's been watching this segment has gone and had a look and said, oh, that is grouse. When you see this stuff in the flesh, yeah, you're going to love it. So isn't that right, Mr. Aaron?
And anything displayed behind glass instantly looks pretty classy. So we've taken all these rubbish items, done a nice display, and people have actually come in and go, oh, how much are these? And we're like, no, you don't want to buy this crap. So that's pretty funny too. So, yep, Greg King's garage sale is open for business, but we haven't been able to add anything to our pile of crap in the vermin infestation this week. We haven't had any more correspondence from SJ Trading customer service, and I kind of think that's because they dragged it out to the 30 days where you can claim a refund or send it back, and it hit that time, and I'm never going to hear from them again. But you know what? We got so much entertainment out of it for, a $39 mask or whatever it is. I'm not going to worry too much about that one.
So does that answer the question that Andrew just posted? Did you get any money back? So
yeah, all the other items were so crap, and I didn't hear from them. I just did PayPal claims, and PayPal instantly gave me the money back for the Jumanji game that's not a Jumanji game, the Transformer that's not a Transformer. I didn't do a claim on the books because although they were pretty dodgy, they just scraped through as like not being like a horrible rip-off kind of thing. But yeah, like it's pretty bulletproof. You can get money back on this stuff because none of it is advertised. What I have done though, I have screen capped everything for this show. So I've actually been able to show PayPal what they said they were advertising and what we actually got, because most of the sites have actually disappeared. So you can't go back and find any of the information.
So the good old soul himself made an appearance on Sunday to check out his stuff because he hasn't actually seen it before. So what did the soul think of Greg King's Cheaper Things, mate?
I wasn't there, and I came in to meet him, and I think he'd already seen it, but I think he got some photos with his own garage sale treasures. So I think he was pretty impressed. I think he was impressed that it was in a glass cabinet. And I think he was impressed that all his work has meant that he's saved people wasting money, and that he's becoming a bit notorious among these internet thieves and swindlers.
Yeah, I do love the fact you did put it on display. It was very, very cool. The Vial has actually asked about why there are no actual rip it off the card stuff. Well, like action figures for myself and yourself. That wouldn't be Greg King's Cheaper Things. It'd be Greg King's Shithouse Things, wouldn't it? So there you go. But you never know. Somebody might 3D print a picture of you and me. What do you reckon? One of those is bound to be a seller. And I want my card to be, what do you call it, distressed, because I feel like that way pretty much all the time. What about you?
I don't think there's enough resin to print my stomach. But I think I think we probably won't get figures of ourselves. We might get a T-shirt sometime down the track. If anything, it's going to be Spankin that gets all the publicity from this show. I somehow.
Yep, that's exactly
there
right.
you go.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Now I'm glad the vial actually. Hang on, what was this? It's from Thomas. When are the spanking coffee mugs available? What's a few for Christmas? Well, there's definitely not going to be anything for Christmas, but nothing like spanking your coffee mug. Organise. Make a couple of good jokes out of that. Very, very cool. All right, so speaking of the vial asked a very, very good question, and of course the vial himself is a very important dude. For that reason, we're going to into the vial file, Mr. Aaron. What do you reckon?
Yeah, so the Vial spent some extra time with us on Sunday and did an extended Vial file on costuming, cosplay, and Halloween trick-or-treaters, which was quite vile. He's gone back to the vintage Vial vault to show us vintage items that are in his antique Vial collection this week. So you can understand after you see these vintage toys from the Vial Vortex why little Victorian kids were so creepy with what the level of, I guess these were the action figures of the day were for kids back then. Let's say on Halloween we were talking about how spooky some of those toys like the Harlequin from Poltergeist are. They've got nothing on some of the toys that were just real toys for kids back in the Victorian period.
Just quickly, Gavin has asked about whether that us two can make a good magazine cover, and the Vial, who is a renowned artist, is already onto that. So I get the feeling that we will become infamous on a magazine cover before we know it. So there you go. Very cool. Sorry, just quickly, I'm just going to welcome Tim to the show for the first time viewer. So very
Tim.
cool.
Good to see you.
Move on.
We are already notorious. If you go to the supermarkets, they usually have a board up and say, "Have you seen this person?" That's where you'll find us, notorious. Anyway, this is great because Dags, you like stuff that's mint in box. The Vial sent us something that still comes with the original box. And I mean, getting dolls from that era, even if they've got the original clothes, must be pretty hard to do. But these have got the original box that they came in. And all I can say is to fit them in that box, some kid has broken every single joint in those dolls' bodies because they're not looking quite healthy, are they? I mean, whoever took this Vial photo, didn't do their best to make them look not creepy at all, did they? They are not the kind of toys that even my son would like sitting on his shelf in his room. What do you think of those, Dags?
They're off, aren't they? And in fact, the worst part is this one here. It looks like their legs or their arms. So yeah, I got to admit, when I saw these photos, I thought, I'll be glad when this Vial file's over and done with because it's pretty off. Speaking of things that are off.
The Vial found a use for these. If anyone is at home and has these dolls and wants to play with them, you can reenact the spider walk scene from The Exorcist because that was where Regan's joints were all out of place and she was walking backwards up the walls and stuff. So even though the movie hadn't existed and these dolls are 100 years older than the movie, whoever created them was channeling The Exorcist.
Yeah, that was actually a very interesting sequence too, because they put that in for the special edition, and that was definitely a bit of a spine-chilling moment. But yeah, that's it's just off, isn't it? It's like, yeah, and some people would love buying these things. I just don't get it.
And again, here's one of those things: creepy little Victorian toys, and what they've done is anthropomorphized animals into people, where you have an animal, but it's like a person. But you get cute ones like you do in I guess Disney and Warner Brothers, but these ones are just a little bit too accurate to sort of be cute. They're more unnerving, aren't they? They're kind of the type of things you look at those, and if you had the little lamb or the fox sitting at the end of the bed staring at you, I don't think you'd be that happy. And then you've got this rabbit, and there's these two dolls that are riding the rabbit, and this isn't someone's randomly put dolls with a rabbit just to sort of put the collection together. This is how it was. So this is one of those things again where I don't know, like if you were in an old Victorian nursery and you put your kids in with that, if they'd play with them or they'd put them in one corner and go and sit in the other corner. But the Vial has found something that these go with. Were you going to say something, Dags?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of like the island of Dr. Moreau gone wrong, isn't it, really? So, yes, and there's a few comments about The Exorcist coming up, but yeah, very good. We move on.
So this is what the Vials decided they were probably from when he wants to reenact scenes from the pet cemetery and going and burying stuff in the pet cemetery. These are the little kids' masks that, you know, go and take their run over splat cat or like the dog that's bit the dust down to the pet cemetery. So in Victorian times, they were creepy, but we can find a movie-related version to use them. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yep. Here we go.
Now, here's an interesting one. This is a Christmas ornament. The Vial almost kept this for our Christmas spectacular, but that's so packed full of inappropriateness that we've let this one slip out already. This is a snowman, and it's a really interesting concept. You can wind the handle one way, and Frosty vomits snowballs into I don't know what that's meant to be. Or if you want to like wind it the other way, then the snowball comes back up into his mouth. Now, why this is a Christmas ornament or who thought it was a good idea, I have no idea on that one, but it's pretty creepy.
Well, two things. One, always remember, like the first tip, never eat yellow snow. And two, maybe it always tastes better the second time around. So I don't know.
Well, the thing is, it'd be 100% better if it had a sound effect. So as you wound it, you went, and it just looked like he was spitting up every time. But again, I don't know what that would be. Like, who thought that was a good idea for an ornament? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly right, Thomas. It's just like eating toasted marshmallows on this.
Well, there you go.
This is wrong.
That's what it is, obviously.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. What was that?
I can't remember what I was going to say now. I think that was a fantastic comment. That's obviously what it's meant to be. Now, here's something interesting. This isn't really looking too vile at the moment. What it is a mechanical doll. So this is one of the first, it's even called a creeping baby. So you wanted to add...
Yeah. I love this one from Gavin, right? Cats, this is regarding the previous one. Cats have fur balls, they have their version. Make of that what you will. Sorry, go on, cut you off.
So this is the creeping baby. And as you can see, they've actually got the patent instructions for it because it was a popular toy. And you can see we're going to go because in the picture there, you can see it's the creeping baby, but it is a bit of a creepy baby. But at least when it's got all its clothes on and its bonnet, that it does look like a baby. And when you wind it up, it's mechanical and crawls across the floor. Now, the trouble is with this toy, there's not many of them exist, and hardly any of them still have any of the clothes or covering on. So the ones that do exist now look like this. So that's the creeping baby that creeps around and gives you tetanus. You can see all the internal cogs and gears and stuff, and it actually looks like if you put it on your lap or something, it would just shear you to pieces with the almost pizza-like cutting wheel that's on it. And you can see in the picture on the bottom right that it's got these massive arms underneath the material and just little spindly things underneath. So this is actually what the Vial would like as his own son, because it is vile enough and creepy enough that he could train it as a Sith Lord. When I was watching this, the only thing that I came to mind was the creepy little dolls in Barbarella, actually. So I did look at a picture. They weren't too similar, but it gives me that kind of creepy doll vibe, and that's what the Vial likes to surprise us with every week.
Yeah, first thing I thought of was like a steampunk kid. So somebody would think that's a steampunk thing. Andrew said, yeah, resistance is futile, so it's actually a Borg. Yes. Or it's the first Astro Boy. So there you go. But yes, very, very cool.
And here's another really interesting one. You know, if you go and get your kids, you know, a shopping set today, or you get a checkout or whatever, they usually come with like the register, and they come with a couple of different products and maybe a trolley and maybe a price scanner and maybe a conveyor belt. No, back in Victorian times, you could get the meat market with a butcher, and you could go and slaughter the hogs out the back and then cut them up and hang them in the window for people to come and buy. So these are real Victorian products. And apparently these are really rare because all the kids used to lose all the meat. But again, it says to me, do you really want to be giving your kid a butcher that comes with like a blood-stained apron and a knife, and then they cut up all the meat and hang them from the window? So obviously another toy that the Vile would love to give his mechanical son, but I don't know if it'd cut it these days.
Boom tish. They kind of got the guy who created this. He said, I'm going to create a meat market for sale. And what they thought he was going to produce was actually like a nightclub with like 50 guys and only 20 chicks. And they're all single. But they kind of got their wires crossed on that one. So nothing like having getting a bit of a slab action, eh? But yes, very cool, but wrong at the same time.
I do like Mark's comment on that. It's a build a figure, build a cow. But here we go. So a bit of a look back in time this week from the Vile, and we've looked at creepy old toys. There's a Jack in the Box that slipped in there as well that is pretty creepy old toys for girls and boys. And these toys have well and truly, with the passing of time, been totally violated.
Absolutely fantastic. Love it. I tell you what, that is just completely wrong on just so many levels, eh? So very, 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 very cool. And you do wonder what were people thinking when they were making these things back in the day. But you are right, the meat market. I mean, seriously, what's the deal with that? If anything, they should have made a collectible a store set up that's actually your store. So that'd be kind of funny. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a full-size 1-to-1 scale version of that, so anything else wouldn't be as good.
Mate, I'd love to see a Lego version and a little Aaron. That'd be worth millions. So I reckon that's definitely the way to go. Whoever's a Lego builder out there, get into it. And in the interim, while we're doing that, or while you're doing that, we're going to get into this.
Ooh, baby, do you know that's what...
Very, very cool. So what are we up to tonight, Mr. Aaron?
Okay, guys, we've sped through the front half of the show as fast as we could because we know everyone is here hanging on Doctor Who stuff tonight. So the eBay stuff is all Doctor Who. And I think, knowing some of the people who are watching, some of you might have some of ideas of what some of this has gone for. So there might be some accurate bids here tonight. There might even be some winners in the audience.
Ange has already put a bid in. We haven't actually shown what the first item is. Jesus, good on you. So, yes, very, very cool. All right, go for it.
Okay, we were talking about Build-A-Figures before. A Build-A-Figure, for people who don't know, is if you go and buy an action figure, sometimes they give you a little extra body part in there. And if you can complete all the action figures from the wave, so all the ones that came out in that same time period, you buy them all, open them all up, take all the extra parts, and you've got yourself an extra figure. And one of the best Build-A-Figures in the history of the universe in any single toy line ever is the K1 robot from Doctor Who, which is the giant robot from Tom Baker's first story. This was the first wave of classic figures, and you had to buy all 8 of them to get the robot. When they came out, they sold out pretty fast. They were really, really popular, and they've always gone for a bit on the secondary market. To give you an idea, the robot goes for about $200 or $300 just by himself, but that's probably too much of a hint. How much for the lot?
I would love it if Ange actually got this at $20 because he put the bid in before the thing even appeared. I love it. So, which is very, very cool. Ange said he's psychic, but he can't spell. So there you go. All right. So Ange said to 20. Spankin has said 400. The Vile says a David 10 at $10. Greg has said that's an awesome figure, but I need a bid, Greg. So there you go. Gavin said 750. Williams at 1200. Collins at 55. Thomas is at 1200. Hang on, Thomas is at 1200. Mark is at 900. Carol's at 1200. Mick is at 1,600, and Jonathan, who's joined the show, which is fantastic, is at 875, which is very, very cool. So everybody's thinking some big dollars, except for Colin and for, where was he? Ange. And Joshua has joined in at 550, which is very, very groovy. All right, so you got to buy all these bits. Oh, and Mr. Phil finally slipped on in at $1,200. Absolutely awesome. And you're right, Greg. Greg, you won't see this at the garage sale. Definitely not. And Rob has chucked in $105. Absolutely magnificent. All right, Ian. He was spelling psychotic. Yeah, well, you might have been spelling it, but you didn't spell it. So that's the point. All right, we move on. All right, so Doctor Who Classics Wave 1 action figure. You build the whole thing, the K1 robot. It's absolutely awesome. And it went for a whopping, who was close to the mark? $890.
I think Jonathan at $875.
No, actually, Mark has got it. He's $9 over.
99.
So,
Yeah.
anything you want to say
Oh,
about this?
It's actually going to be a close one tonight because there's a few Doctor Who fans here. That's a good investment. They were $29 each when they came out about 10 years ago. I think the thing with Doctor Who figures, if you get the classic series, they're always going to be popular because they're not one of those things that are a fad. There are hundreds of thousands, maybe that's an exaggeration, there are hundreds of tens of 40-year-old men who are waiting for these figures their entire life, and then character have made them, tapped into that nostalgia, and once they're sold out, they only go up. It's like that Yaz song, The Only Way Is Up.
And I've told you a million times not to exaggerate. All right, let's go, shall we? There we go. Let's go. Woo! Oh, pops, just what the world needs.
So here we go. Is this a useless pop that we would feed to Rob Bubo's Bubo dog, or is this actually a good one that actually commands some money? It has got that little sticker on that says Comic Con, but we know that means nothing because we've had Comic Con ones go for 10,000 and Comic Con ones go for 99 cents. Now, Peter Capaldi was a fantastic Doctor. He's got a bit of a fan base. Surely someone's going to chuck a pineapple on for that one.
I love this one from Ange. He put $20 on because it's worth $20 each. And you just keep stringing that long bow, son, and we'll see how we go. All right. So Ange himself has said $6. Collins at 150. Carol's also 150. Spankin is at 250. Mick is at 35. Jonathan's also at 35. Gavin, who's at $2. Joshua's at 50. Williams at 300. Thomas is at Thomas is at 65. Rob is at 25. So nobody really has an idea, eh? So here we go. Violating the 12th Doctor is the 175. I thought there was an extra number at the end, so he's only $175. Now I missed a couple of people along the way. So Joshua said 50. Is that where I was? Williams at 300. Thomas is at 65. Rob is at 25. Glenn, good to see Glenn joining the show, is at 40. That's right. Greg's at $2 at the garage sale. He's not very optimistic about this Doctor. Mark's at 350. Jimmy, good to see Jimmy joining the show, is at 150. And good old Phil is at 150, which is absolutely fantastic. So there you go. The Pop Doctor, 12th Doctor, yada, yada, yada. San Diego Comic-Con. What does everybody think this is worth? Still mint in the box. Who cares? It went for a whopping $550.
So it was a pop that's worth hanging on to. Again, with all these pops, I don't think it's worth that, but obviously it's the market that dictates. There were only... See, the thing that gets me with this one, there were 1,008 of them, and I think that's actually quite a big run. We've seen some of these pops that have 50 of them go for like $500. So this one, someone lashed out and took it for $550. Who knows? I guess that's where the market's at on that one.
Actually, sorry, I think it's Mark. Yeah, Mark has still got to cough up 200. Did Mark win the last one? Because that's got to cough up an extra $200, Mr. Mark. But there you go, you're the closest, and no one is even remotely close. So,
close.
Yeah, Mr. Phil, $550 is pretty ridiculous, isn't it? So there you go, very expensive paperweight, or something to chock up the wheels of the car or the caravan so it doesn't roll backwards. So there you go. All right, move on. More Docky Who.
Now this one is interesting. This is a stencil that was given away with the Streets Ice Cream Doctor Who ice cream lollies. So it is quite a rare item. And as we've seen, some of these food items from cereal and ice cream and the displays for it can go for quite a bit. These were on, there was a seller that had a couple of them for sale quite recently, and you don't see these. These are the first ones I've seen come up for a couple of years. Greg King might even put his hand in his wallet and give more than $2 for this because he collects stuff like this. How much would you expect to pay? And you know the best thing about this? It's useful. Once you've got it, you can draw Tom Baker over and over and over again.
See, Greg might put the extra $2 in, but I might not accept it. He might be locked into $2 no matter what he puts on the screen. All right, Ange has gone the full $1,600 on this. Gavin is 65. Collins at 250. Mick's at 230. Spanker's at 275. 200 something bucks is the way to go at the moment, isn't it? Carol's gone for 365. Mark, who's trying to bat 3 for 3, is at 99. Thomas is at the 300. So if somebody else goes for 100, they might just beat Thomas by $1. Williams also at 300. Joshua's at 350. Jonathan, hang on, sorry. Screen moved. Jonathan, hang on, I've lost Jonathan. Oh, he's down here. Jonathan's at 150. So there you go. And violating the ice cream as he should, we won't tell you how he does it, is the Violet 160. Rob is at 70 and Jimmy's at 100. So there you go. I like this one. Yeah, go hard, Mark. Go hard or go home. So there you go. Very, very cool. A stencil. That's the kind of thing you definitely don't see in your travels, eh? So if you like licking your Tom Baker head, yeah, you're definitely going to need one of these. 175 for Phil, and there you go. Or if you don't like him, just watch him melt away. He's like, I'm melting, I'm melting. So there you go. All right, 1982, freaking hell. All right, so what did this go for? The stencil for the milk bar ice cream of the docky, good old Tom Baker, looking fantastic. Give your doctor a licking. He went for a whopping $150. Is that it?
Well, I think that's okay for what it is. I mean, if you got it out of an ice cream. Now, I don't know. We might have the winner for this auction here. I don't know. I was talking to someone here about this a week or two ago. Oh, Glenn was 150 and Jonathan was 150 as well.
Yep, there's two people. Yep.
So Jonathan has a little smile and a wink. So I don't know if he actually bought that. So.
Insider trading, eh? So there you go. So for that reason, Jonathan, you've lost it and it's gone to Glenn. So there you go. Good on you, Glenn. From good on you. Watch on the YouTube, which is absolutely fantastic. He was watching with interest. So there you go.
There you go. So it is interesting as well because the way they've taken the picture, the stencils come in different colors, and I don't know if that's the yellow one or the green one. So anyway,
and it sounds like Jonathan didn't get it. So there you go. But he must have been watching it. So yeah, very, very cool. All right, we move along. Number 4. Oh, check this out.
Now this is an interesting lot because it's the Doctor Who and Goodies and Borat. Now, Borat's the odd one out there, but anyone who grew up in Australia used to watch the Goodies and then Doctor Who. This is interesting because the Peter Davison card there is an error card, and they withdrew that one and replaced it with a slightly different picture and a slightly better coloured one. You can see that looks a bit bleached out. That was a well, they printed it like that, but it was a mistake. That shouldn't have been like that. So that is a rare card in this lot of figures. And you get a Goodies one and a Borat one as a bonus as well. And it has been listed with Doctor Who, Goodies, and Borat. So it's a triple threat auction. 3 fan groups could be after this auction.
I like the fact that as postcards, they're just listed as acceptable in their condition. So that means it could be all this writing on the back. So you do wonder, don't you? So there you go. I need to find where we are. Okay, so Ange has come up with 1701, which of course is the USS Enterprise. So I know what you're saying there, Ange, which is very cool. Regarding the previous item, Gavin said maybe it started yellow and went green. Yes, much like some Doctor Who fans that I know. Gavin is at 45, Collins at 60, Mick's at 5. Okay. Williams at 120. Good old Cheese Noodle joining the show from Twitch. He's at 25. Joshua's at 25. Rob is at 6. Thomas is at 85 cents. Carol, $560. Crikeys, what are you smoking out there in Ballarat there, Carol? Spanker's at 145. And you reckon with Carol, she say, yeah, it's the Borat picture that's worth all the money. Spanker's at 145. Mark is at 30. Jonathan's at 15. And Glenn, he's following the Carol route at $250. Oh, my God, for 3 freaking postcards that are classed as acceptable. Philip has slipped in there for 100, and Greg is at $2. Good to see Greg slip in his $2, which is very, very important. That's not even $1 a postcard. Absolutely love it. So you keep the one you want and chuck the other 2 away, or put them back on eBay and sell them accordingly. So there you go. And going to violate this at $50 because of all creatures, great and small, which pretty much sums up Aaron and myself, which is kind of groovy. So there you go. All right. So Doctor Who Goodies. Yeah, goody, goody, yum, yum, as someone said earlier. The Borat, 3 postcards. They are acceptable. There was only 1 bid. Someone just chucked in a couple of bucks. What did they go for?
$3. Very nice.
I'll tell you who didn't get it. Carol didn't get it at 560.
So I think that's all right. A buck each. You could buy those and get rid of the ones you didn't want or keep them all. But that was again a good buy because you get the error postcard there, even if it's only in acceptable condition. So there you go.
See, normally Greg would have got this at 2, but he kind of got jibbed because he was 3. Hang on, no, he's $1 short, isn't he? I think Greg actually might have this because someone said 6. There was a couple of cheapy ones there, and I think someone said 5. So. They're sort of in the middle, aren't they? So no, Greg gets it actually. So Mr. Greg King, you got something for your garage sale, son.
Yeah, I was going to say we can send a postcard to each of them.
We'll send a postcard to using one of these. The Borat one. Wish you were here. So and he's excited by that. Oh dear, very, very cool. So what you need to do, Greg, is you get the Borat one. You take it to the store when there's the 3 of us getting the rider photo, and you say which one of us 3 is going to represent Borat and the Mancunian. Who's the two girls? I love them. So there you go. Yeah, send him to the sellers of dodgy shit. Anyway, gotta love it. All right, we move on. We've got one item left. Oh, check this out.
So here we go. Anyone who collects Doctor Who will know the Target books. They did 150 odd of the original series, and they've done about 20 new ones over the last couple of years, where they've reissued some and done some from the new series and finished off the last couple of stories they didn't do from the original run. This is Doctor Who and the Smugglers. It's a William Hartnell book. It was printed in the late 80s, early 90s. It was one of the ones near the end of the run. So there was a million of these around, not literally a million, but, you know, they would have had a print run of tens of thousands of them. How much would you pay for the Smugglers to complete that one you're missing in your collection? And there's a lot of...
What?
Sorry, there's a lot of book collectors here, so they know their prices. So we'll see how accurate they are.
Yeah, I've told you tens of millions of times to stop exaggerating. So there you go. All right, so let's have a look. So Ange has kicked it off with some ridiculous number, 700 and whatever. Cheese Noodles at 6. Joshua's at 5. Rob is at 4. The number doing a Thunderbirds countdown here. Colin's at 100. Gavin's at 10. Mark is at 50. Greg, who won the last one, is at 2. Spank's at 25. Phil is at 75. William's at 75. Mick is at $1.50. Jonathan is at 42. Carol's at 95. She's got money to burn. I'll tell you what, good old Carol, these high bids. Tom is 135. Holy guacamole. And violating this Doctor Who book and the Smugglers is the Vial at 35. Glenn is at $50. So there, yeah, hang on. I think there's more. Hang on. Sorry. And the Vial, I thought they had the Vial, $35. So there you go. Very, very cool. All right. So good old Terrence Dick's book, Doctor Who, The Smugglers, Target novelisation. So there you go. You can buy this at Target back in the Target for those who like to be a little bit classy. And it went for a whopping, what do you think it went for? $500 effing dollars. And guess what? I think Thomas might actually have this off the bat. What do you reckon? Oh, hang on. I'll check it out. But what do you got to say about this, dude?
Well, that was obviously bought for someone who does not know what these things go for, because that is massively overpriced. So that is either someone who doesn't know what they're going for, thought they were buying the hardback version and it still went for too much, or it's money laundering at its finest, where that isn't a true bit at all. But that is absolutely crazy for that book.
I love it. Yeah, someone's pocket is big on the inside. So there you go. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Thomas is happy. Woo! You'll take it. But no, actually, I think Ange got it. So Ange put in this ridiculous number. I think even before the item even came up, and he actually gets a couple $100 back. So,
he is psychic.
Hey?
He is psychic.
Yeah, exactly right. So there you go. Yeah, what the frick? That is ridiculous. Marcus said he would say 50. So... yeah, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? But I love this one, yeah, from Jonathan. Yeah, no way. So very, very cool. Which is actually, it's good that everybody reacted the way they did, because there's something you want to mention about this book. Is that right, dude?
Yes, we like to be educational here as well as entertaining. So a while ago we did buying stuff on the internet as a topic, and we had Ash from Evil Dead saying, don't shop smart, shop S-smart. And he is back just to show you, don't buy the first thing you look at.
Well, before you do that, you've got to actually show this version.
So I had a look online at sold auctions, and this was also sold in the same time period in England, and they did ship internationally. It was £10, so more than the book to ship it here. This one was in mint, amazing condition, so like new, and there were 4 bids on it, and you could see there was a bit of a bidding war, and it went up to £9, which is about $18. And so if you had bought that for £9 and you paid your £10.50 postage, you could have landed it for about $40, which Joshua and a couple of people are saying it's worth about $40 or $50, which is probably the right price in Australia. If I had it in the shop, I'd probably put it in for $29. It isn't a particularly rare book.
I like the fact that Ange got this because the number he put in was the USS Voyager registration. Goes to show that Star Trek is grouse when it comes to buying Doctor Who books. So that's where he got his price from. And, of course, he gets some change, which is very, very cool. But, yes, it does go to show that you need to sort of know what you're on about. And that brings us to what were you going to say?
So Ash says, buying the £9 one was smart, but buying the $500 one was not smart. And remember, when you're buying stuff online, shop smart, shop smart. Don't just buy the first one you see. And I think most of the people here are pretty eBay savvy, especially when you're joining on this this segment. But all of the things we see, be it a chicken McNugget for $2,000, you're always going to find another nugget that's probably $10. So don't buy the $10,000 chicken McNugget. Have a shop around. And this was a prime example where if you do put that book in and do a global search, there's probably 30 or 40 of them available, and every single one of them was cheaper than the one that just sold in Australia.
Yeah, it goes to show the person who paid the $500 or whatever really didn't know what they were doing. So that was, someone has said here, hang on, I lost it. I've got to find it now. About 500. Here we go. Mark. Yeah, absolutely. 500 gullible dollars. That's exactly right. So, yeah, very, very cool. It's obviously one of those things that someone said, I really need this book. It's the only one I'm missing. I'll pay anything just to get it, not even thinking that you can get it somewhere else much cheaper. So there you go.
But that's why this segment is fun, because we don't put what they usually go for. We find the extremes, either too high or too low, and highlight them. And we hope everyone enjoys having a guess.
Exactly right. Well, guess what? It's just gone a fraction after 9 o'clock, and that actually brings us to the topic of the night for all you Docky Who fans out there about to just lose their load over what's coming up. So, Mr. Aaron, I'm going to bail out and leave you to this one. So, what have you got tonight?
So I guess anyone who's been long-time viewers saw we did collecting 60s Doctor Who a couple of months ago over 2 nights, and we are going to do 70s Doctor Who over a couple of nights as well. And tonight we're going to be looking at the Jon Pertwee era. We'll have a little bit of a look at the era, but the majority of our chat will be about collectibles. Dags will highlight anyone's comments, so if you want to throw something in, because I know there's a few Doctor Who fans here tonight, and I've asked a couple of people different things, so some quotes will come up from different people through the show as well. But let's get into it. Doctor Who, Jon Pertwee era started in 1970. Jon Pertwee was probably at the time the most famous actor to take the role of the Doctor. William Hartnell did have fame, and so did Patrick Troughton, but Jon Pertwee had fame in radio for voices in comedy. He'd done comedy in movies, some of the Carry On movies. He'd also had his own characters that he'd set up on radio based on his Navy service. They set him up as the Doctor, and they asked him to play himself, which he found hard because he said he'd always hidden behind funny voices or a funny nose or a costume or something, and he had never really played brave characters. He'd played a couple of gangsters and a couple of serious roles, and a lot of British actors start in the theatre when they're sort of paying their dues in the acting industry. But when it came to Doctor Who, he was asked to play himself, and he really didn't know how to do it. And I think it was the producer, Steve Brighton, the head of drama and of children's television. He had regaled them with stories of his time in the military and the different antics he'd got up to, and they thought that would make a perfect Doctor Who. So he went legendary to his father's house and went into an old chest and pulled out some clothes and a cape and did a photo call. And they go, "That's it. That's the Doctor. You've nailed it." And that's how he became the Doctor, and that's how he played it for 5 years. So if we go back to that first slide, sorry, I think we're going back 2 slides, Dag. Sorry. So the one before that one. We had the Doctor who is the dandy, and he had 3 different companions over his run. He had Liz Shaw, who was a Cambridge scientist, Joe Grant, who is his longest running companion, and then Sarah Jane in his last year, who is more associated with Tom Baker. And then we also had the unit military organisation that was the backbone through his era as well. So we had the Brigadier at the top there, who had been already in Doctor Who a couple of times and in unit, and we've got Mike Yates in the middle, Captain Yates, and Sergeant Benton at the bottom, and they are commonly known as the unit family, who kind of were in his Jon Pertwee's entire run. Now if we go to the next slide, he had a lot of awesome monsters, and you can see just about every story from the Pertwee era had a memorable monster. Even if some of the stories weren't as memorable, you had the Autons and the Nestine and the alien ambassadors, the Silurians, the Master, the Primords from Inferno, the Auton Daffodil Men, the Axons, the Keller Machine, the Primitives from the Doomsday Weapon planet, the Omega, of course, the Daleks returned after a long break, the Drashings, the Ice Warriors, Azal, Sea Devils, all the Peladon delegates and Agador, the mutants, giant maggots, Kronos, the most realistic dinosaurs that have ever appeared on television. Maybe giant spiders and the Sontarans. So if you're a merchandiser, there is a lot to choose from the Pertwee years. If you're writing books, comics, posters, it is almost sort of a Technicolor menagerie of amazing things that you can use in your merchandise and material. So if we go to the next slide, probably the first thing available of Jon Pertwee memorabilia was the Radio Times that he appeared on the cover. And talk about cutting it fine and not appearing in the 60s. This was January, the first week of January 1970. He had the Radio Times cover, and then his story started that year. And of course, there was a big Radio Times article, and in a few other newspapers, there are a few stories about Doctor Who if you're a cuttings collector. Interestingly, back in those days when the Doctor changed, even with Patrick Troughton, it wasn't big news. It was kind of 2 lines in the newspaper saying, and the lead of Doctor Who was changed from Patrick Troughton to Jon Pertwee. Jon Pertwee, I guess, because he had a bit of a radio following and probably himself is a more publicity orientated actor than Patrick Troughton was, he probably did more publicity. He'd turn up in public in his capes, he'd go to signings and really beat the drum for the show. So this was good for the show because it had almost got cancelled at the end of the Patrick Troughton series. The BBC were looking at other science fictions that might replace it and sort of freshen up the time slot. They were looking at maybe bringing Quatermass in as a regular series and a couple of other sci-fi shows. Ultimately, they kept making Doctor Who because it was probably the cheapest. So they just gave it another series just to see how it would go. So Jon Pertwee had a series of Radio Time covers during his time as the Doctor. He had 5, which I think is the most of any of the classic Doctors up until that point and after. The second one there is the Terror of the Autons with the Master, and then the Daleks returning warranted a Radio Times cover, and the 10th anniversary with the 3 Doctors coming back all warranted a Radio Times cover. And then the last one there, Who's Your Friend, is a very, very special one for me. Because I think I've said I've told this story before. My parents kept all the newspapers and Radio Times and stuff like that from the day I was born and put it away. And when I was about 13 or 14, my dad went into the garage and said, "Oh, look what I found." And he pulled out that one, and it was in stunningly mint condition because it had been in the garage for 15 years. But I was born on the day that they had that Radio Times cover, Who's Your Friend? And it was the first episode of the new series, The Time Warrior, was shown the week that I was born. So if you're a cuttings collector, the Radio Times is really good through the whole era, but through all of Doctor Who. The Jon Pertwee ones are particularly good because Doctor Who went over to colour. That was the big difference in the series coming back with Jon Pertwee. So there was a lot of colour articles, and you've got Frank Bellamy and other artists doing comic books and drawings to illustrate the stories. And there's a fantastic one there in the bottom right-hand corner, which was a 2-page 4-colour introduction to the colony in space, which is very, very reminiscent of the artwork in the sort of boys magazines of the time, like Countdown, TV Action, TV 21 and that kind of thing. I could imagine if I was getting the Radio Times every week and that had rocked up with this 4-colour Doctor Who comic, I'd have just wet myself. It would have been absolutely amazing. The other thing that's note on this slide is on the far left, you've got like the new series is coming article for Jon Pertwee's first season. And this is a bit misleading because there's a Cyberman in that picture. And in the article, they had pictures of the Yeti and the Ice Warriors, which they must have pulled out of the the costume department and just for photos because they weren't actually in the series. So that would have been a bit disappointed for some fans at the time. But if you're a Radio Times collector, these are getting really hard to get now, and they're getting really hard to get in good condition. So the 60s Radio Times had always commanded quite a high price. Now those ones are starting to go up in value as well. And to get a really nice copy of any of those, you're not going to get any of them for under £100. And you usually are buying them in pounds from the UK because they were the UK TV listing magazine, so they weren't available anywhere else in the world. So you can collect all of the Radio Times because all of them will have a listing with the cast and a little picture on some of them or most of them. I tend to just collect the main issues. So we've moved on now. One of the other early things you could get were cast cards. Now, cast cards are a bit like postcards, but if you were a fan of a series, and this wasn't just Doctor Who, this was any series, you could write into the TV station and go, oh, gee, I really love the Master. Is there any way I could have a photograph or an autograph or something? And if you were lucky, they'd send you back a cast card with the picture. And if you're really lucky, they'd send you back a cast card autographed, because I'm sure they gave them to the actors and said, hey, can you just sit down after dinner one night while you're watching TV or whatever and just sign as many of these as you can. But if you were super, super lucky, you might send in some fan mail, and the BBC used to give cast cards to their actors, and you might get a dedicated one and a letter come back to you. Now, cast cards are probably one of the hardest sets of merchandise to collect. If you collect any other kind of postcard or sets of gum cards or lolly cards or anything like that, you can generally find people who've got a set or track them down. But you've got to remember with cast cards, they were released over decades, and each production team sort of only had a couple of different cast cards. So no one really collected all the cast cards from the start, because you might have liked Doctor Who in the 60s, but you grow out of it by the 70s and you're not sending off for the new ones. So once in a while, a new cast card turns up that no one's ever heard of before. And to find the full sets, you can go 10 years without seeing some of these come up for sale. And then the worst thing is you might see one that comes up for sale and it's dedicated to someone, and you're like, oh, I'll wait for another one because I don't want one signed to Jonathan or to Philip or to Mark. So it is one of those really long games if you want to collect a full set of cast cards, and you've got to decide, do you want all of them undedicated? Do you want all of them signed? Do you want all of them signed to someone else and it doesn't matter? Or do you just take whatever comes up and you take a mix? I have a couple of cast cards. I had a collection once but sold them, and I don't think I could ever collect them again because it takes so long for them to come up, and the price has gone through the roof on a lot of this stuff. So the next slide has someone's collection of cast cards, and this was on a Facebook group called the Doctor Who Objectified. Will Valentine run it, but I think he's archived it and closed it down. So I couldn't ask him about this because he's effectively withdrawn sort of from Facebook. This is a collection of cast cards he had up. Now, some of them are real, and they're the genuine cast cards that you could get from the BBC. But you can see there are some from characters that maybe weren't as popular and wouldn't have got a cast card. And someone has still mocked up the style of cards you would get from the BBC in the 60s and 70s. And they've mocked ones up and then sent them out and got them themselves. So maybe 3/4 of the ones there are real, and then there's a couple of the ones there that aren't real. But I think it's one of those things you can see. If you get a collection of anything and you put it together, it looks pretty impressive. So if you're a Doctor Who fan and someone says to you, I've got a collection of cast cards, and you see that, that's a pretty impressive collection. Stuff like that impresses me because it is really a lifetime of collecting, trying to track them all down, make sure they're genuine, make sure they're genuine autographs on them, and all of that kind of thing. They really don't turn up very much, and they're one of those things that a lot of people would love to have, but you just never see them for sale. Now, one of the other things that is more accessible to most fans is trying to complete a set of Doctor Who annuals. The annuals that were released during the Jon Pertwee period are a real mixed bag. The first one there, the pink one in the top left-hand corner, is recognised as the hardest to find Doctor Who annual. And this was because Patrick Troughton left the show and the ratings weren't fantastic. And the annual kind of came out really before anyone knew if Jon Pertwee was going to be popular or not. And there was a handful of pictures from the series that was coming out. And it was just released onto the market, but world distributors didn't have much confidence in it. And it is the annual with the lowest print run out of the entire run of the annuals. I think there's about a third of that one from the normal print run. So it's really hard to find. And then, of course, Doctor Who was popular, so they disappeared really quick and they didn't reprint it. There is a bit of controversy on that one because there are some people who think it comes with a pink spine and some people who think that it comes with a pink spine and a white spine, a variant. I am pretty sure the white spine is just sun bleached and the pink spine one is the normal one and the white spine one is a damaged one. But, you know, it's one of those things that you can't really prove one way or the other. The other interesting thing about this, the annuals are notorious for having really dodgy artwork of the companions. Usually they get the Doctor pretty spot on, but the companions usually look like they're just a totally random photo and nothing like the ones that appeared on the TV series. Now, the Liz Shaw is pretty good through the whole 72 annuals, so they must have had publicity shots of her. You can tell it's meant to be her. Interestingly enough, there's a 72 annual in the bottom right-hand corner there. That isn't actually an official Doctor Who annual. There was a gap. They missed a year with the Doctor Who annual, so it was one of those things that bugged Doctor Who fans a lot, where if you have any collection and you have the year on everything up until that year, and then there's a gap, and then it goes right through to the 80s, it's going to bug you. So recently there have been a group of fans who have started an annual project, and they made themselves the 1972 annual in the style that it would have come out in 1972, with the sort of same level of articles and artwork and everything. So everything we're looking at during this show is genuine 70s merchandise, except for that one. I just put that one in as an example of how popular the period is, that you still get people these days filling in the little bits of history that didn't make it. So the middle annual there, the 1973 one, there's a really interesting variant on that. I don't know if people can see. That is actually two annuals. On the top left, it's an indigo color, and on the top right, it's a purple color, because there were two printings of this annual, and it's a very subtle difference. But when you get inside, for some reason, the monochromatic pictures are flipped. So in one annual, if it was purple on one page and orange on the next, it's flipped. So in the variant, it's orange on the first and purple on the opposite one. Now, I didn't put a lot of pictures of that up because it would just be putting lots of really average drawings of the same kind of picture. But there is a variant of that annual, and the other difference is I think one is an international version and one was local, because the price clipping in the front on one version has no money value at all, and on the other version has the UK price. So that was the difference you would get in some of the annuals. If we go to the next slide, we will see the next group of annuals. And again, the Pertwee annuals were interesting because they moved away from illustrations that had been on the cover, and they went to sort of more heroic pictures of Jon Pertwee. And I don't know if this was Jon Pertwee and his agent getting together and demanding this, or it's just how it went. Jon Pertwee was a bit notorious on how his image was portrayed, and maybe that's a good thing. Because maybe it protected the integrity of the character of Doctor Who as well. But it did seem to be after the first annual that they had a whole lot more Jon Pertwee pictures on the cover. And I know with stuff like that, actors often might have got, £5 per picture that was on the cover each time they used a different picture, which doesn't seem a lot now, but back then was a heck of a lot of money. So there's the 74 and the 75 annual and some of the illustrations within. And the illustrations within all the annuals are pretty much horrifically beautiful, I guess, where world distributors had house artists, and there'd be 30 or 40 different annuals a year for different TV shows, and they pumped out sort of generic pictures with the stars on all of them in each different annual. So you'd have these artists that were often working around the clock. There's an interview with one of them. It's quite notorious when we get into the Tom Baker annuals. They talk about how they were just off their face, and some of the pictures in them just made no sense with what the story was. So you'll see in these ones that there's vistas of weird alien planets and multicolored stars and backgrounds that don't really have much to do with Doctor Who or what's happening in the article. And this was because they were just painting these things and getting as many of them into different annuals as they could each year, which actually makes them, in retrospective, really interesting, because you look at the annuals and you're just like, what were they even thinking with a lot of these things? Doctor Who annuals are always going to be popular, I think, because it is one of those things that people get one or two and then feel like they have to collect every single one. I have found the hardest thing to do to get with Doctor Who annuals, as I mentioned earlier, is to get ones that have really unfaded spines. I know with that annual there, for example, the 1975, I thought it had an orange spine for the longest time. And then I found one where it's actually a dark red spine. And then I started looking at my other annuals and realized a lot of them had faded spines. So they're continually been upgraded. The other thing that sets you apart as a collector between a novice collector and an expert collector, never pull your annuals out by the top of the spine when you remove them from the shelf, especially if they're tightly packed in a shelf with a lot of other books, because the annuals have notoriously weak spines. So if you grab them by the top of the spine and you forget and you pull them a bit, often the spine comes away and you're left with ruining your annual. And if you have got the 71 annual, which regularly goes for $500 plus in mint condition, and you pull the spine off, you're not going to be feeling very good about yourself, are you? So the annuals are one of those things that I think if you collect books is a good place to start, because they're always available. And then if you work back and fill in the older annuals, it's quite challenging to get a full run in nice condition. So the Pertwee annuals are a cool thing to collect. Now, we were talking about the cast cards earlier, which were sent out from the BBC to fans when they requested stuff. But during the Pertwee era, there'd been Doctor Who fan clubs before, and there'd been fanzines, but it was in its infancy. During the Pertwee era, it was really when Doctor Who started to get a following. Doctor Who had gone for 6 years, 7 years, and there were long-term fans who were writing to the BBC and inquiring about different things. And you could write to the BBC and you could get photographs. And the top left there is an official press photograph that if you sent away, you would get the photo, and the press photo meant that on the back, the second photo there, it's pretty hard to read, but it gives you the details of the story that's from, the year it's from, the actor, a little tiny synopsis and a little bit of biography, and you could use that for press. And you can see the Jon Pertwee fanzine volume 1 there has got that publicity photo and used it on the cover of their fanzine. So this was the really early infancy of fandom. Down the bottom underneath that is actually a little biography that Jon Pertwee got written up about himself, and he had printed on the back of his fan postcards and stuff. And it basically talks a little bit more about him as an actor than the BBC were going to put into anything they sent out on his behalf. And then you've got letters down the bottom there with the BBC address on it, just the replies they've been given back to fans from the time. And then there's one there from an acting agency as well, where someone sent off for information from Jon Pertwee. and they got back stuff from the acting agency that he belonged to. So this is another super specialized area of fan collecting, and one that's really hard and really challenging. And there's a few people here I talk to, and still now I'll pick up a collection and I'll say, oh, look at this, I got these photos and I didn't know on the back of them there's some stuff from the ABC or there's some stuff from the BBC, and it turns out to be something that, even though you might have seen the photo before, the fan information or the station information hasn't been discovered. And that's the really interesting thing about Doctor Who with other franchises and with other sort of films. Most of the stuff that turns up is well known about, but because Doctor Who has run for so long, and the BBC is such a big organisation that's been run by BBC Enterprises and BBC Worldwide, and then the production office do some of the advertising, and then satellite stations like the ABC might do their own thing to promote stuff, or when it got big on the PBS stations in America, they did stuff to promote stuff. Official things released still turn up today that no one had any clue existed, and this sort of starts at the Pertwee era, especially from the production side of things, where fans actually started writing into the production team and they would send stuff back, and it was something that they became aware of and they would need to do. So anyone, again, who collects the cast cards and the fan stuff, it is a really challenging but rewarding area of collecting, especially if you can find something new or a new photo or something like that. And stuff from the era does turn up, because just a couple of weeks ago, I found a colour picture of the Crorantula that no one knew existed, and was printed back in the 70s in a magazine in Holland. And then it just, sat there with no one categorising it or putting it online. And then we found it and put it up and realised what it was. And that happens with Doctor Who from time to time. There's some of the researchers in the UK. Richard Bignall is one of the archivists who kind of goes through archives and will find photo finds of maybe a local paper that went out to a location because it was close to them and took, 30 or 40 photos, and one of them appeared in the local paper, and then the rest of them have sat as negatives in their archives for 50 years until someone goes and finds it and prints them, and suddenly there's this wealth of photos from the era that no one has seen before. So it's fascinating and rewarding, but also quite challenging to be that kind of collector. So we move on to comic books, and where you go from a specialized area of collecting like cast cards that is hard to do, there are a lot of Doctor Who comic books from this era. Now you can see the three main companies that printed comics during this era in this slide here. There is TV Comic, and I've never been a big fan of TV Comic, not because the comics were bad, but for most of this run they had Tom and Jerry or the Pink Panther or something like that on the front cover. And although Doctor Who was a regular for years and years and years, they might say, Doctor Who Inside page 18 or something, but it didn't really get any big covers in TV Comic during this era. That page there is the first Jon Pertwee comic. Now, when we did the 60s, we showed the last Patrick Troughton one where scarecrows came and got him from the Time Lords and made him regenerate. And this comic just basically starts with, and here's the newly regenerated Doctor, and the Brigadier's got like an urgent message for him, and off they go into adventures. The Doctor Who comic in TV Comic was generally 1 or 2 pages. Sometimes it was the center page, so it would be color. Usually through this era, it was just the black and white 1 page sort of comic strip weekly. Now, the Countdown and TV 21s, this is what we're going to look at more closely, because these are amazing comic books, and they're from probably the last great era of British comic books before American books kind of took over and became more dominant in England. If we go to the next slide, the first thing we're going to look at is the Countdown comics. Now, I said TV 21 before. We're talking Countdown and TV Action. Countdown was kind of the spin-off comic from TV 21. TV 21 comics we looked at, they were sort of broadsheet newspaper size on newsprint. These were larger than regular comics, but not as big as newspaper. They were still on newsprint with glossy front covers, they still kind of kept that almost tabloid headline sort of look to them. They'd have articles and comics, and I haven't put any of the pictures up, but I tell you what, I went through all of these on the weekend looking for the Doctor Who issues and Doctor Who pictures. There are more amazing pictures in these comics on the Apollo missions and the moon landing and space and NASA and all these amazing rockets being built than you can find online. They're in higher detail, and these were kind of a boy's own comic. So you would have Doctor Who and UFO and Jerry Anderson, but they're mixed in with real life articles on space exploration and under the sea exploration, and then UFOs and Loch Ness Monster, but really well thought out. And I can understand getting these week to week. They were more like a digest than a comic. They had lots of photos from different popular TV shows from the time, and they always had amazingly bright covers that I think would be quite attractive from the newsstand. So if we go to the next slide, this is more of a run of the the Countdown. They started as Countdown, and then they changed to Countdown and TV Action. And by this time they were Countdown and TV Action. And these were when the Daleks became part of the comic again. Now, anyone who knows the history of Doctor Who would know that the Doctor Who rights belong to the BBC, but the Dalek rights belong to Terry Nation. So when the comics want to put Doctor Who and Daleks in the same comic, they have to pay double the rights for having the Daleks in them. So it is kind of an event when the Daleks were in the comics, because they would often, only be in for 6 weeks. They'd buy the rights to use them for 6 weeks, and then they'd be gone again. And they'd go between different companies. So if TV21 had the Daleks, TV Comic couldn't use them. And then TV Comic got hold of them, but the rights were too much, so they used them for 6 weeks, and then they give them up again, and Countdown gets them. So this is the run of Countdown comics, and with Daleks in, and the artwork in these is absolutely stunning. I do like the British comic artwork from this era. There are some great artists that worked on Doctor Who comic and a lot of British comics. It's very different and very distinct from sort of your action figure Marvel DC comic. It's more a painterly style of telling the stories, not as stylized as action heroes or superheroes. And you can tell straight away when you look at them, they're very British and of their time. And like I said, I think Countdown was the last of the great comics before they really sort of lost it, because we're going to go over to TV Action now. And we started with Countdown and TV Action, but then it changed to TV Action and Countdown, and they were kind of phasing out that sort of older version of British comic storytelling and the British comic books, which are more digests. So what you have now generally is just comic books, and you've lost the articles on sort of the behind the scenes of the shows, and you've lost the articles on space travel and on different factual stuff, and they concentrate more on comic books. Now, they probably did this because it sold better at the time, but looking back, the books were unique when they had the wider range of stuff that they had in them. Now, I've highlighted some of the books here because they did get the rights to the Daleks to launch TV Action. So when Countdown changed to TV Action, the Daleks were back to get that extra sales boost. What actually happened, they actually look and feel cheaper. They're now on newsprint without sort of the glossy covers. They're more of a comic book cover. You can't really see it in the pictures that I've chosen. They still look great and have amazing art, but they haven't got that same sort of, I guess, the quality feel to them. And I found this run that have a Doctor Who competition. If you design a Doctor Who monster, you can win an amazing 17-inch TV. And so this was quite a big prize at the time. And the amazing thing is, if you win the TV, they pay your TV license for a year as well. Now, the TV license isn't anything we paid in Australia, but in England, I think till this day, I think it's voluntary now, but you had to pay a TV license, and part of that went to the BBC to fund programming. So rather than the government paying out of the taxes, you were licensed yourself, and they raised the money that way. So this was one of those competitions they did at the time where you could win a 17-inch TV, which would have probably been amazing. And it was colour as well. I know I read a lot of fans who didn't even see Jon Pertwee in colour, even though it was broadcast in colour, because no one had TVs at the time. And colour TVs were quite expensive. And I've read story after story of there's a special event like the Olympics or a coronation, and we had radio rentals, but they had the equivalent over there where people would go and rent a colour TV for the special event and then go and take it back because it was a bit special to have a colour TV. So winning a colour TV for a kids competition would have been pretty amazing. And in the comics there, you've actually got Jon Pertwee went and judged it, and it looks like the production office judged it. And you would have been, as a kid, thinking, oh, this is amazing. They're going to use my monster on Doctor Who. They didn't. They used it in the comics. So the little boy that designed the monster from Doctor Who, I think it was called the Ugrak or something like that, Ugrukk, and looked a bit like a little guy with an elephant head and tusks and a trunk. They used that design in the next 5 issues of the comic. So that would have been pretty cool. You design the monster, and then it's in the comic. Now, TV action continued for a while, and it got cheaper and cheaper. And what they would do, later issues started coming out. We looked at the Daleks on the last sort of TV countdown slide. They re-released the same comic, but instead of doing it week by week, they would go, this issue of TV action is Doctor Who. So you'd get all of the stories condensed into one issue. So it was kind of good if you were a Doctor Who fan. It would kind of suck if you were buying it because you wanted to see the Persuaders or Hawaii 5-0 or something like that. But it also meant if you'd been collecting the books for a while, all of the stories, not just for Doctor Who, but for everything, sort of became recycled. So there's the original artwork there, which is on Chris Hill's site, the Space Museum, which is worth checking out if you're into Doctor Who merchandise. And then there's the comic and how they've used it next to it. And they've put all of the comic books from Countdown into that, and it's just a reissue. But they kept numbering these, and they kept doing these, and they kept going until it sort of eventually died out. They'd also have some interesting little articles, and down the bottom there, they've got fact files on different Doctor Who characters, the Doctor and the Master and Joe and the Brigadier. And this was done by Polystyle. Interestingly enough, we talk on this show sometimes about what was available in Australia and what wasn't. Because we're an Australian show, it's really interesting to work out what was brought out in Australia and what wasn't released here and how much it cost. Now, I got a full run of these that I picked up in Australia, and the guy hadn't imported them. He had got them from his local newsagents in the 70s, and they still had the price on, and the regular price for most of the issues was 12 cents. And I've still got all those prices on. I haven't erased the prices, even though I probably could. But the specials, you can see there's a couple of specials. They were 25 cents, and I reckon that was a rip-off because the specials were not twice as big as the regular issues. They maybe had like 10 more pages or something. So they were a little bit bigger, but they didn't justify being more than double the price. I think you can see, though, if you collect comics, the Jon Pertwee era is a really amazing era to collect comics from because they are so vibrant. They have a range of different stories. They're really well illustrated in that they look like the Doctor, and a lot of time in the comics they didn't. And there's good runs. Like I said, the ones with the Tom and Jerry covers aren't as much interest to Doctor Who fans, but the last couple of slides you can see there's some really amazing artwork. And if you're into artwork, the 70s Doctor Who comics, yeah, pretty good. Now, here we go. You know you're popular in a TV series if you get chocolate bars made of you. And we've looked before that there were a couple of Doctor Who confectionaries. They were mainly based on Dalek Mania. But what started happening with Jon Pertwee, he was gaining an audience a lot more who watched the show and enjoyed the show as an action show than maybe had happened in previous eras. So it was a family show, and it always has been a family show. But during the Jon Pertwee era, it was maybe a little bit more serious, and they had the military aspect to it, so it was maybe a little bit more adult. The monsters were just as scary and just as crazy, and the stories were inventive. It was in colour, and the ratings was slowly going up over his era. And so when that happens, you get stuff like Doctor Who milk chocolate bars, and you can collect, I think it's 26 different backing bars to make the entire comic. There's three different colors. There's the purple, the blue, and the yellow. And then you can see on the back of each of them in the bottom right-hand corner there, each one has a little picture and a little story. And you can collect them all, and it puts together a Doctor Who story with the Doctor and Joe fighting the Master with Unit, which is pretty cool. You know, if you're buying a bar of chocolate, it doesn't hurt to have like a Doctor Who story with it as well. And they were some of the ones that were available for the third Doctor. And they were 3p each, about 5 cents in Australia at the time. I don't think they were released here, though. And they were by Nestle. But what's cooler than having Doctor Who chocolate bars? What's the next slide? Doctor Who Sugar Smacks breakfast cereal. Now, again, I have to thank the Space Museum here, because these are incredibly rare. And I've never been able to track down a packet of these for myself, even though I'd love one. And so most of these I use the Space Museum as a resource because I don't have them in my own collection. And what is interesting about the Sugar Smacks boxes is there are so many different versions of them. So you can see the one in the front center there comes with a free Doctor Who badge, which I think would have been fantastic if you're eating your cereal and you find a Doctor Who badge in it. And you can see down the bottom there were 6 badges. I do have the badges. They're a little bit easier to find. The hardest one of the badges to find by far is the unit badge. And I don't know if they made less of them or kids weren't as impressed with them as they were with the characters, but that one seems to always go for more and be harder to find. So the breakfast cereal came with free badges to begin with, but then it came with other stuff, and I would have been pretty disappointed. There's ones there that come with plastic animals, so you can get a lion, not like a space lion or something, just a lion. And then there's ones that came with vintage roadsters, which were these little plastic cars. Again, they're just the cereal toy kind of cars, but nothing to do with Doctor Who. If they'd have had Doctor Who monsters in them at small soldiers size, and they'd had a range of them like Crater Critters or one of the other sort of breakfast cereals, I can't imagine how much they would go for now. They'd be one of the most collectible Doctor Who items available. The interesting one here, though, is there was a back that had the cutout of Bessie, so you could make your own Bessie, which is the yellow vintage car that the Doctor drove during the era. But I could not find actual box that had that on. There are pictures of the Kellogg Sugar Snacks Bessie, and you can download replicas so you can build the car yourself. And I found a fragment of the box on the side where it says comes with a Bessie, but I couldn't find an actual box. So that must be one of the rarest items as well, if there's none around. So that's a pretty cool item. And the cereals are something I've never had. I've had the badges, but I've never had any of the boxes. Why weren't the cereal boxes made to look like the TARDIS? Because they're not as smart as you. I know why, because then people would complain when there wasn't enough cereal on the inside, because, you know, that would be false advertising. It's not bigger on the inside. There's just the regular amount of cereal. So that's probably why they couldn't do the TARDIS. But yeah, they did miss an opportunity. They could have done a TARDIS. That would have been pretty cool. Now, what I was talking about earlier about Jon Pertwee being a bit possessive over, or a bit protective over his image is probably a better word. There weren't a lot of posters I could find from the 70s. There were a couple. The Dalek one there in black and white, I've seen a couple of them turn up. I don't know if they're from the 70s. They're pre-1985 because I've seen them around from them. I don't know who produced them or where they're from. Maybe they're from the Blackpool exhibition or something like that. I've only seen them overseas, never in Australia. But the one on the right there with him being menaced by the claw, that came out, and then he was apparently really upset because he thought that the Doctor should never be seen in jeopardy. He should always be seen controlling the situation. So that poster, I think, was either withdrawn or they weren't allowed to make any more of it because Jon Pertwee wasn't happy about it. And there was a series of jigsaws that we're going to look at later that were coming out, and he vetoed some of the pictures on that because there was one that was going to have him being menaced by a sea devil. And he was like, no, I don't want my Doctor to look like he's in any danger. He always has to be in control of the situation. And this was apparently the poster that did it, where he wasn't happy. That maybe you could have that photo in a book as part of a larger set of posters. It is an unusual image to use as a poster, though, where you have all these monsters and aliens and the heroic Doctor, and in this one you've got like a really bad paper mache claw and the Doctor looking terrified of it. So maybe Jon Pertwee was right on that one. And these are some of the jigsaws that I was talking about. So in that series of 1, 2, 3, 4, the first 2 puzzles came out, and then 3 and 4 came out later. The backs of them you can see changed. They originally came out with the Doctor Says, that yellow box that's in the middle. And that came out on, I think, all 4 of those jigsaws I've had with that back. And then it was replaced later with the blue back that advertised different puzzles from the line. But that was the set that was going to have the Sea Devil menacing the Doctor, and it was changed. And you can see instead there's one of him in Bessie and one of him sitting in the laboratory, one of him fighting Daleks and Ogrons, and another one of him fighting Ogrons. So I don't know if the jigsaw with the Sea Devil would have been any better, but it would have been a bit of variety. I tell you what, though, it would have been better than some of the blue series that we see on the right. There is a cool picture from the 3 Doctors of Jon Pertwee and Patrick Troughton, which is pretty cool to have. And then they used the same picture as they'd already used on another jigsaw for the Daleks in the top corner there. But then there's probably 2 of the most boring Doctor Who jigsaws ever produced. The Doctor sitting talking on a red telephone, and the Doctor picking a mushroom and contemplating eating it. And I tell you what, him being attacked by a sea devil would have probably been a much better jigsaw than either of those 2. All of those jigsaws are pretty hard to get because the ones in the first series are in really flimsy cardboard boxes, and they often end up crushed and mashed, so don't turn up in good condition. And the one in the blue series didn't sell very well, so they don't turn up very much just because there's a lot less of them on the secondary market. So they were some of the jigsaws available from the time. So there was 8 of them, and they're quite, I guess they're easy to get a set if you put your mind to it. Dags has joined us.
I have. Hang on, I've got to swap over. So there's a comment here saying that with the serial, actually, saying if you open it up, there's a TARDIS design on the inside. And then Thomas said, talk about thinking inside the box. So I thought that was just a very, very funny comment. So very, very good. So there you go.
So
I now return you back to your regular program.
Oh, I was going to ask, what have you thought of all the Doctor Who merchandise so far?
Yeah, it's good. It's like a lot of things where it's sort of trailblazing for what was to come in the future with other Doctors. And I guess like a lot of things, they'll design something, release something, and as time goes on, they'll work out what's popular, what's not popular. And then, of course, once future Doctors came into play, obviously Tom Baker's next, they'll sort of go with that design and that mindset. Like we talk about the chocolate and the cereal, that might have just been a one-off. They said, oh, we'll just give it a shot. It's a bit of shits and giggles. And they realize it's actually a big market for it. And then, of course, it just explodes. And then suddenly, instead of being one brand, there's like 5 or 6 different brands. So yeah, a lot of things, when they start these things off the first time around, it's leading down the future path. And you can say, well, this is where it's all ended up, but this is where it all started. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So we're going to go over to records now, I think.
Yep. And I'll leave you can return back to your regular program.
No problem. I think records is a really fun area of collecting with Doctor Who because there is such a wide range of different releases. A lot of them are variations on the Doctor Who theme. Some of them are amazingly good. I guess there's the original one as well. And some of them are so crap, they're amazing too. And you'll hear a lot of podcasts use some of the weird themes that have been pumped out over the years from different you know, and their orchestras have done the orchestral version of the Doctor Who theme. Here we've got the BBC official release. Now, it changed in the 70s. Originally, it was released in mono and had Brenda and Johnny on the back. Now it was released in stereo and has Reg on the back. Basically, it's the same thing, but in stereo. They didn't do a change in the because the theme has subtly changed over the years, but they pretty much just did a mono version of the same theme. You've got the Don Harper version, Homo Electronicus, which is, I have to say, one of the worst versions of the theme. I guess some people might like it, but I think it sounds pretty amateur. It is one of those, someone's got electronic sort of keyboards and stuff for the first time and gone, whoa, this sounds futuristic and amazing, but it doesn't, and it's kind of really dated now. There's some different versions of the Doctor Who theme there in the Decca covers. They're sort of the blue spiral covers, and you can kind of tell what era you're getting the Doctor Who theme from by if the Decca is in a curved logo, a round logo, or on a square, and by the covers as well. The 60s versions are in orange sleeves and the 70s versions are in blue sleeves because the house style, I guess, changed over the time. There's a rare record in the corner there, the I, Roy version of Doctor Who, which is a reggae song. Now, I don't know if that was meant to have anything to do with Doctor Who. It's called Doctor Who and mentions Doctor Who once, but that could just be any old Doctor. I don't know if it's the TV Doctor Who, but it's an interesting album nevertheless. And because it has a leopard on the label, it's interesting that it's a lot different from a lot of the other Doctor Who labels. Then there is a lot of the amazing worlds of Doctor Who sort of on different soundtracks released by the BBC. And this would usually be either special effects or incidental music by Dudley Simpson. And there might be one track or a couple of tracks on them that you couldn't get anywhere else at the time. So it'd be quite a thrill for Doctor Who fans. When collecting Doctor Who vinyl, it's like shop smart, because you will see in the UK, you get like every dealer puts £99 on everything. And then if you look, you will find something that they're asking £99 when it bids only went for £2 kind of thing. And the other thing you want to be careful with Doctor Who is making sure the condition is okay. So always read the condition of albums, because it does make a big difference if you get a really rare album and it's mint compared to a really rare album and it's absolutely trashed, because you're probably just going to end up trying to upgrade it if you find another one down the track. I love collecting Doctor Who records though, and the other thing I like to do is try to get Australian pressings, because I like to find the local pressings. Not a lot of the stuff in the 70s was released in Australia. You do find down the track in the 80s when BBC Worldwide and Enterprises were pushing it a bit more, that we got more local releases. But with Doctor Who, up until this point, it wasn't really shown in America, so there weren't US pressings. Hard to get pressings of anything but the theme from overseas at this stage, and a couple of the TV 21 albums. And then this was probably, out of the independent albums, this is the one that got the biggest push to be popular. This is Who is the Doctor by Jon Pertwee. And it is basically an electronic rock version done by some of the members of Deep Purple on the Purple label of the Doctor Who theme, with Jon Pertwee basically narrating over the top. Now, this is interesting because out of all the Doctors, Jon Pertwee has probably released the most solo music in his career away from Doctor Who. There's a couple of the other Doctors that have had one or two tracks, but Jon Pertwee has had 30 or 40. A lot of those are bawdy ballads and salty seaman shanties and stuff like that. So it isn't exactly that he was a pop star, but he did do a lot of music, and he released songs by Wurzel Gummidge as well. Now these examples here, there's a promo pressing, which basically has on the label promo not for sale, that was sent out to radios. And then there's the regular pressing. I've only got the promo pressing that has a line highlighted through it, sort of taking out a line of text. There is versions of that you can get that haven't got that line blanked out, but I haven't got that version. Then there's some of the advertising, which is quite amazing, really, considering at the time, you know, you've got I guess not the Beatles, but it's moved into sort of Led Zeppelin and that kind of era. And then you've got like Doctor Who up in the record shops amount it with Doctor Who singing his new version on one of the Yes, Jon Pertwee does When I'm 64. I have got that album somewhere, but I think that's from the 80s, so I didn't put it in this. But Jon Pertwee has sung some of the Beatles tracks, as Jethro says. And Jonathan, my friend, sent in for me to use in that poster, which I don't have, which is a full-size multi-fold out poster advertising the single. So they really went all out for this, and I don't think it was very successful. You see more promo copies around than you do bought copies, which says something, doesn't it, that they sent out more and gave it away than people actually bought it. In amongst the Doctor Who novelty records, it is one of the better ones, though. Down in the left-hand corner there, from a music magazine, they actually, did a lyrics as well. You could get the pop magazines that would have all your favourite lyrics in from tracks that you didn't get. So if you wanted to work out what James Rain was saying in Hammerhead, you'd go to your smash hits and they'd print it all up. Well, there was an English magazine that was obviously the equivalent, and they are the lyrics to Who's Doctor Who, all about transversing time and things like that. So that's a really cool little piece of music merchandise that was released during the Jon Pertwee era of the show that I don't think any other Doctor has tried, except for maybe Doctor in Distress, but the less we talk about that, the better. So let's go on to the next slide, because we're blowing out time-wise. Now, one of the things that happened during Jon Pertwee's run was the 10th anniversary of the show. And the 10th anniversary was the 3 Doctors, where they got the other 2 Doctors back. And up until that point, I don't know if anyone would ever have thought that was possible. I know if I'd got the Radio Times and that had been the cover, and then I'd read the synopsis for the episode, and it was the Time Lords are in trouble, and the only way they can be helped is the Doctor teams up with himself, that would have blown my mind. That would have been the best thing I had ever seen. And the other thing is, because you didn't have repeats and you didn't have video recorders, if you were a fan of William Hartnell or Patrick Troughton, they were now a few years ago in the memory. So it would have been really nice on nostalgic for people who grew up with the show to revisit it when they returned, which is something we don't think about now, but would have been amazing back then. And this is one of the only items of merchandise that was specifically released for the 10th anniversary. Now, for the 20th and the 30th and the 50th, we got mounds of stuff and magazines and books and all different bits and pieces. This was the 10th anniversary special put out by Radio Times. And at the time, it was probably one of the most important pieces of Doctor Who merchandise ever, because this was the first thing that came out that looked back at the show, looked back at the companions, and was like a history and retrospective, and sort of treated Doctor Who as being an important piece of landmark television rather than just a kid's show. So if you'd grown up for 10 years liking the show, suddenly you were sort of validated in, this is a successful show. It did have different eras. It was popular. It did have all these highlights over the time that it's been on, and it is loved and it is well remembered by the public. Now, this magazine is incredibly hard to find. It was released in Australia. I don't know if Tim's still watching. I used to be jealous because he picked up a copy in the newsagents here when he was growing up. But it took me years and years to find a good copy, just because I think fans loved it so much. It was so leafed through that they usually turn up in quite poor condition. And this has been reissued. It was reissued for the 30th. In Australia, it was reissued with a different cover. So it is an important sort of landmark publication for Doctor Who. So if we go to the next one, the next slide, though, we've got a quote here. I asked a couple of different people who were involved in fandom for quotes on merchandise, and I haven't been able to use all of Phil's quote, but I asked what was his favourite Jon Pertwee piece of merchandise and Tom Baker, and he came back with this one, which again is a landmark publication. It's the making of Doctor Who. So this was more in-depth making, and again the history of the series, and he chose this probably because of that. It's like one of those pieces of merchandise that is quite hard to get. I have found them in the wild in Australia, so it probably was released here, but it is quite hard to find, and most of the copies I have seen I've bought from the UK. And the thing about this one is it has an orange spine, and it is incredibly hard to get with an orange spine. Most of the ones that turn up now I've got the look like that. with a faded spine. So that should be orange, but it is one of those that, you know, the color goes on it really, really fast. So if you can find a making of Doctor Who, don't worry about the cover or what's inside, because do you know what you look at for 99% of the time it's in your collection? It's spine when it's sitting in the bookshelf. So if you can find one with a nice orange spine, you're doing pretty well. Now, one of the most important things that happened in the Jon Pertwee era was the Target books were launched. Now, they were launched in tandem with the hardbacks. Alan Wingate released the first hardbacks in 1974, I think. They only released two, the Auton Invasion and the Cave Monsters, and they weren't that successful. They mainly sold to libraries, so they're actually really impossible to find a non-ex-library copy now, but the paperbacks were launched at the same time, and the paperbacks were launched with the original three paperbacks that had already been printed in the 60s, and they were rebranded with the new logo and with snazzy new covers, and they were an instant smash success. So the hardbacks were put on the back burner for a year. There were only two released for a year, where the paperbacks became an instant hit with kids because they were pocket money. They were from a popular franchise. They had these amazing comic book covers, and you could kind of get them and read your favorite Doctor Who stories because there weren't videos back then. Now, I know there's a lot of people who collect the hardbacks here and the paperbacks. I do want to do an entire show on them sometimes because there is too much to cover when we're looking at things in just one era. But that said, if we go to the next slide, these are the first range of Target paperbacks that came out during about the first year and a half. And I think they probably stand up today as some of the best TV tie-in novels that were ever produced. The care went into them that they got a lot of the original writers who wrote the scripts to novelize them, or they got people involved with the show like Terrence Dicks, who was the script editor at the time, to do them. They released ones that were current, and they also released went back into the catalogue and picked favourites from older Doctors. But I think everyone would agree what sold them is the amazing covers by Chris Achilleos, who was the resident Target artist for the first couple of years. And a lot of the images are so iconic that even though the covers have been reprinted by different artists and in different versions over the next 50 years, it is still these versions that, you know, will send people back to their childhood in primary school when they first read a Doctor Who book, or they first saw them sitting on a shelf in a bookshop. So we will, at a future point, do a much more in-depth look at Target books. And next week, when we look at the second half of the 70s, we will look at the other Target books that were released as well, but we will go and do a whole show just on the books at some point, or maybe hardbacks and maybe paperbacks, because there's so many collectors and they're so beloved, and I could talk about them for hours and hours, and this is already overrunning. So we better pop to the next slide. And this is the miscellaneous stuff that sort of wraps up the end of the era that really didn't fit with anything else. There's the Doctor Who colouring book, which is quite hard to get, especially uncoloured. But it's a nice book. It's just the cover, really. The inside is, you know, your standard colouring pictures. There's the two TARDIS Commander badges that were available at different exhibitions in the UK. There's two transfers that are incredibly hard to find from the 70s, one of a Dalek and one of Jon Pertwee fighting the Daleks that just don't turn up. I put the item up the top because it was released during the Pertwee era, even though it isn't really Doctor Who, but it's Jon Pertwee on the back of a cake recipe book from the Co-op, just basically saying how much he loves all the recipes in the book. On the far right, you've got the Doctor Who Space Mission Pad, which is another incredibly rare item that I have never had myself, and found pictures of online, I think, again, from the Space Museum. And then one of the rarest items I think I've come across in that I didn't know it exists, there's the glass colour wheel at the top there, which is a bit hard to see, but it has different scenes and monsters from Doctor Who. And until I was doing this episode, this had slipped onto the Space Museum recently, and I hadn't done a check of it for a while, and I did not even know it existed. So I had one of those, oh my goodness, a new piece of old merchandise has popped up moments that I sometimes have. Another one of those things that there's only one in the world of, so I'll never be able to add to my collection, kind of thing. So that's sort of the end of the Pertwee era. And there we go.
Christ, I like it. It crashes right at the very, very end. How's that, eh? So hang on, I got to show that picture. Jeez,
Yes.
Tell you what, that's just no good at all. What were you saying, dude? Sorry.
No, I was just saying, so I was actually surprised there probably wasn't as much Jon Pertwee merchandise from the 70s during his run as I thought there would be. More obviously came out after he was the Doctor than during his time as the Doctor. There was many more books and merchandise, and the Doctor Who magazine launched, so a lot of things come out after. And Jon Pertwee was a particularly good actor when it came to promoting Doctor Who. A lot of actors, once they've finished with a role, they move on to their next role, and they don't really want anything to do with their old roles anymore. Jon Pertwee was an amazing actor, where he was turning up to conventions and he would still wear his own clothes, which were Doctor Who's costumes, right up until he passed away. And he was always happy to do promotion and talk to fans and do conventions, even though he was a successful actor and could do anything else he wanted. So I have a lot of respect for him for doing that, because, you know, there are some actors that they leave the role and they don't want anything to do with fans ever again. Kind of thing.
Very good. And this is the image that we're trying to show. So there you go. And of course, that brings us to the end of the episode. And thanks. Like if you could hear a round of applause coming from the audience, I'm sure you would hear one. But of course, that will lead us into what's happening next week. So what do you reckon, Mr. Aaron?
Push the button, reverse the polarity. So next week, we're doing part 2. Oh, you've spoilers.
You got to give me longer videos, dude.
Sorry. So next week we're doing part 2, and we're regenerating into Tom Baker. And Tom Baker, I don't know, because this episode I thought was short and we've run 10 minutes over time. We might have to do in 2 parts, because for Jon Pertwee, there wasn't a lot of merchandise for the time he was the Doctor. That's 5 years. Tom Baker, there is 7 years worth of merchandise, and it really ramps up. And you have the books and you have the magazines and you have him doing a lot of crazy promotions and things like that. And the show really does start getting massively popular. So next week, it could be the Tom Baker years, or it could be part 1 of the Tom Baker years. We'll see.
Very, very good. So thanks for sticking around, everybody. We'll see you all next week for a bit of Baker action, a bit of Docky Who action, or Chocky Who, as was mentioned earlier. So actually, I had a good laugh when I did see that. So there you go. In the intro, make sure you keep all of your TARDIS collectibles mint in box.
Or rip them out of the TARDIS.
Very good. See you later, guys. See you on Friday. Don't forget, go to the store on Friday. Okay, then. Catch you then.
Pizza and drinks. See you there. See you.
Bye.